spent 200 hours this year just making this one project for you, which is the $100 million scaling roadmap, and broke up the stages of business into 10 stages. And you can identify where you're at by simply just putting in your business information. You can access.com/roadmap, and it'll spit out this custom report that tells you what the constraints are
Legend rank
to graduate and get to the next level. This is our gift to you absolutely free. On the thank you page, you can book a call with our team, and we'd love to help you figure that out and ideally get past it. So, number 4, you have to take care of people who work in your company's personal life so that they can succeed in their professional. So, I'll tell you how this manifests in reality. The biggest one is if someone's spouse or significant other is not a fan or supportive of the job and work that they have, they will never achieve their thing. And it's sad, it's unfortunate, but and it may be controversial for some of you, but I have yet to see it. If you have a spouse or significant other, somebody you live with, somebody who's like your other person, and they're not like, even if they're neutral, you will not achieve your potential. Honestly, not even close. Not even close to your potential. Because I think, at least I'll just speak for men, being good on the home front allows you to have full access to your brain so that you can go after the hunt, right? If you're worried about what's happening at home because you know that when you come back there's gonna be bitching and you're like, why are you working? Oh, it's always another tough season. It's always gonna be busy. If you have that in the back of your mind or your ear, it's like you start pulling your punches. You start cutting out early. You start avoiding taking on bigger projects and taking slightly smaller projects. You don't set the bigger goal because you know the effort that it's gonna take to hit it, and so you just say, well, this is an inadequate goal. And I'll be clear, nothing wrong with that if you don't want to see how far you can. And not everyone knows, and that's fine. But when I think about the people in this organization, I have taken more and more attention to making sure that their personal lives are supportive, their environment is conducive to them doing the best work they possibly can, because I want people to be able to do their life's work at acquisition.com. I want, like, think about the record I just talked about. When someone is 85 years old and looking back on their life, there are very few moments that you actually remember, right? Like, you don't remember the best moment of your life. You have a couple moments that spit out. Like, when you get, I'm sure when you're much older, you might only remember like one moment from a year. Think how crazy that is, right? And so I got to say truthfully to the team, when you're looking back on this part of your life, you will be able to say that you made history. And there's not that many days that you get to do that. And so making history, though, only happens when you've got every single thing aligned and luck. And so to be arrogant enough to believe that you're going to overcome your conditions that you set up for yourself, and you've got somebody who's not supportive versus somebody who does, good luck. But that was just it was a big lesson for me, and then I'm paying attention to that from a team perspective of who's got supportive environments at home, who's got supportive spouses, and is there ways that I can help them get the support of their spouse so that I can unlock their discretionary effort towards the goal. And I will say that making sure that if you do have super hard workers in your team, hard workers will run themselves into the ground when the goal is big enough, and so they will usually look to you to see when to rest. And so you have to be willing to be like, take the day, take the weekend, unplug, and then usually I've just seen, this is me personally saying this, I think that when they see it from above or see it from the person they're quote rolling into or responsible for, getting managed by, getting led by, they can actually unplug from things because they're like, hey, he asked me to chill out, I'm gonna chill out, right? And I think that it's your responsibility to have a gauge on where people are getting close to cracking and doling those out. Number 5, think for yourself or the world will think for you. So this is what I thought a lot about, which is to be unique, you need to have high agency. And so agency is essentially being able to reason for yourself from the things that you can observe or have observed. And so at the lowest levels, if they will say that you like a person, a show, a movie that most people don't like, it's thinking for yourself. Most people, and here's where it gets really interesting, most people pick their identities off the shelf, right? They come with pre-canned beliefs. They have a set of apparel that they wear that's the fashion of this guy. Oh, I'm a hipster, which means I have to have gauges, I have to have one of those beanie hats, that's a small thing, I wear black combat boots, black things with the chain, whatever, because I'm a hipster. And all my beliefs are gonna be what hipsters believe. Or I'm a redneck, and so I'm gonna have flannel, and I'm gonna wear a trucker hat, and I'm gonna have jeans, and I'm gonna have super conservative views on X, Y, and Z, and whatever. I'm gonna live in the country and I'm rich. All right? There's nothing wrong with doing that. It's just that most of the time, when you pick your belief set, and you pick your personality off the shelf, the reason that you do that is because you didn't actually reason for yourself. Meaning, there's probably not 100% of hipster worldviews that you agree with. There's not 100% of redneck worldviews that you believe with if you believe in that, if that's you, right? And so if you actively think about all the components of your life, which is like, what shoes will I wear? Why do I pick these shoes? What makes a good shoe for me? Why do I wear these shorts? What makes a good short for me? Why do I wear this shirt? As silly as that may sound, you choose every single component of your life, and you either choose to live it by default or live it deliberately. And the people that are interesting typically have multiple components that they reason for themselves that get put into one box. And so then when people see them, they double take because they're like, wait a second, these pieces don't go together. And what does that do? It makes you interesting. And so let's say that you have the body of a meathead and you dress like a redneck, but you quote ancient philosophers, and you're also extraordinarily wealthy. That's weird, right? That's odd. And so if that's you, then you will probably attract attention. And so a lot of people want to live a unique life, but they take all their decisions from pre-canned boxes off the shelf, out of the box. And so I think that asking yourself, what do I want? And does this thing help me get it? Are the questions that begin to lead down the path of agency. Because if you approach every component of your life with that lens, you'll often find that the things that you took off the shelf don't. The politics you vote for, the people that the sports teams that you root for, all of this stuff that you built your life around, not at all. And so having high agency is higher cost in the short term because you actually have to make these decisions and also suffer the rejection of decisions that other people who might all dress like hipster not agree with because you didn't take the same belief out of the box or off the shelf as they did. But it's lower cost long term because you don't find yourself 10 years down the road wondering how you got here. How did I marry this person? How did I start this business? Why am I dressed this way? Do I even care about this stuff? Why do I vote like that? You got here because you never questioned your decisions and just went with the flow. You went with what everyone else was doing, but everyone else is unhappy, mediocre, overweight, in debt, and divorced. Why would you be like that? And so the only way out is by turning inwards and saying, what do I want? And does this thing help me get it? And if the conclusion that you come to is different than everyone else's, great, because you don't want to be like them. So you should hope to find discrepancies between what you decide and what other people decide, because it means you've begun the path of thinking for yourself. Maybe you like a movie that your friends don't like. Instead of saying, I mean, it's okay. Don't hold back. Be like, I think it's a great movie. They're like, well, you're an idiot. You're like, okay, I like that show. That show's trash. Okay, don't watch it. Like, that's it. Right? Oh, why do you wear such lame shoes? Why do you wear jean shorts? Alex, why did you wear the little sandals for 2 years that I wore that were really weird? Because at the time, those shoes served what I wanted. Because I was at the beach a lot, because Layla and I were traveling, so I was like, I want something to go to the gym, I want something to go to the pool, I want something to go to the beach, I want something to climb, I want something to go to a restaurant, so I was close to shoes. You guys know everything I want? Great. Alex, it doesn't look cool. To who? Who does that look not cool to? Girls? I'm married. I don't give a shit. Who does that not look cool to? Guys? Why do I care what they think? Right? I didn't know how to say anything. Like, why would I care about anything? They're not walking in my shoes, quite literally. These are comfortable. And if you don't like them, wear whatever shoes you want. Right? And so I think that and this actually has a tie to marketing, I think is important, which is like, if you want to make content, you want to build a brand of some kind. The brand has to get built from the bottom up. You have to reason from that perspective. What do I want? Does this help me get it? And when you think that way, you actually be able to build a unique brand because no one will have the same exact life experience as you. When you do that, that is what creates the unique combination, and you'll be able to defend why you believe what you believe. Because if you cannot explain why you believe what you believe, you believe what someone else told you to believe. And you have a question. Number 6, a hard conversation up front can save you millions of dollars and years of life. So Rockefeller said this, which is a friendship founded on business is better than business founded on friendship. So the big thing here is, I used to hear people say, I only can do business with people via handshake. And people that I just met when I was really young were like, oh, if we have to draw a contract, I don't want to do a deal. And I was pressured into doing handshake deals when I was younger with people that were more experienced because I didn't want to seem disingenuous or ungenerous, right? I'm a dishonest person, so I need a contract. And then I just realized they were complete scoundrels, bullshit. And so then I went the other extreme, which was like everything has to be contracts, which I think by and large would serve you really well for anybody who's starting out your first 10 years of business. If you do 10 years of business with someone, you will be able to where you can have handshake agreements. But you do not extend trust to someone who has not earned it. And I think that there's different levels of this. If an employee comes into the business, of course, like you have to extend trust, right? But if we're talking a business partnership, well then like we should have a track record here. We should have a large data set of behavior that I can look at in different circumstances where I know they will behave in this way. And so for me, trust is believing that the person will act in ways that are similar to the way they continue to act in the past, right? They're consistent. And I want to be real with you for a second. So I said this year was a tough year. I had 8 lawsuits this year, right? And most of them were at the very beginning of the year, and I dealt with almost all of them. And here's the part that people won't know. All my lawsuits have been with people who were friends with me or friendly. And if you're like, well, I can't believe that he would get an argument over his friend. What do you think divorces are, right? Like, we humans think that we're somehow immune of like, no, I'm really cool with this guy, we're best friends, I don't think we're ever gonna get an argument. Okay, well, consider this. People who sleep with each other for extended periods of time, make life commitments to each other, half the time end it. So if you think the most important relationship in your life where you're sharing everything with this person, you're committing to forever, half the time it ends, maybe, just maybe, write that button. And the reason that I honestly had a lot of these lawsuits is because, and the thing is it takes years for these things to come due, right? Like you have a business thing that was 6 years ago, and then the thing finally really starts to make money, and then you come, right? And so you have to deal with all the uncomfortable stuff up front. And I just so strongly encourage you, like, those contracts, I avoided hard conversation and was like, we'll figure it out when it gets to that. And we both didn't want to talk about those things. We didn't want to mess up the friendship. It's like, bro, if you think you can't have a hard conversation when there's no money on the line, just assume that you will be in a lawsuit for many years. Just assume. And if you're not willing to have that hard conversation up front and you willingly will go into having multiple years of lawsuits on the back end, then you deserve it. Right? And it's so avoidable, and it's likely that it's not going to work out because one or both of you can't have hard conversations, which is required for success. And so I unfortunately have the scars for this one. The contracts that I've done in the last couple of years are significantly better than the ones that I did 6-7 years ago, but those are the ones that are coming due now. And so the time that you should have great agreements was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. So just start with the frame of like, hey, I want everything in writing just so we have no misunderstandings and there's no unspoken expectations. Because the last thing in the world that I would want is that I would disappoint you because you expect me to do something that I was unwilling to do and that I didn't know you wanted to do. And so you can approach from that perspective, and then you have to say, hey, what happens if you don't want to be a partner with me? What happens if I want to be a partner with you? What happens if you die? What happens if I die? Right? What happens if we disagree on where we're going to put the money? Right? What happens if we disagree if we're going to sell? These are all things you have to talk about. And so you either do it now when there's low stakes, or you do it at the end when you both have high stakes. And I promise you, much better with low stakes. So it's a really cool concept. I think Sharon said this, and I really like it. He said you can see what level of friend you have by the things that you talk about with them. So you have 5 levels of friend. I really love this. And I would use this as a litmus test for thinking through the quality of friendships that you have in your life. The lowest level of friend is someone you can only talk about past friend. Oh, the good times you used to have. I remember high school, past, right? The next level, friend, is somebody you just talk about other people with. Oh, how's so-and-so doing? Let's talk about that person. Let's talk about that person. AKA kind of gossiping, but that's what it is. Level 2. Level 3 friend is somebody you can talk about ideas with. Oh, wouldn't it be cool if? Oh, isn't it amazing? You dream, right? Ideas, concepts. The 4th level of friend is somebody you can do stuff with. You can type those ideas and actually execute. You can take action, you can do things together, etc. 4th. And then 5th is friends that you can make, lose, and spend money with. And I believe that because for whatever reason, money is just one of those subjects that I think it just shows it shows how someone behaves around a reinforcer and what someone values. It just kind of cuts through the crap of everything. And so, like Sharon, for example, is our president. Sharon and I have done deals together for like 5+ years. And we really started almost as, to use the Rockefeller quote, like, we are a friendship founded on business. And it has worked out great compared to most of the businesses I founded on friendship. And so we just done lots and lots of deals together. We've had ups, we've had downs, we made big calls, and I just have seen him in all the ups and downs of those years. And he's seen me, and we're like, let's do more stuff together because it's so rare. And so at this point, could I have a handshake agreement with Sharon? Yes, totally. And we do have them on lots of different deals. On the really big stuff, we still write it out. Why? Just so we're on literally the same page. And so I was just reminded of that this year. I'd be remiss to not say what I learned from the 8 lawsuits that I got in this year. Those are my big takeaways, is that know what level of friends you're with, make sure that you put everything in writing, and you want to front load the discomfort. Numbers up, do more than what is required. So I said this was a legal year, and so part of this was looking into compliance and other things that are kind of risks for any businesses as you get over a certain size. Because the bigger you are, the bigger the target that's on your back. And so if you wish for success, you also wish for the pain that comes with success. And as much as people want to say like, champagne problems, or rich people problems, they are problems nonetheless, and I promise you they are still painful. And so I would say you want to go above and beyond. So what's interesting is you also want to become educated, right? Ignorance is not defense. Real. If you don't know a law exists, it does not exclude you from the consequences of it. And so realizing that, you have to be proactive in learning the laws of everything that applies to you, which is there are a lot of them. And now with AI, they can summarize some of these things, but like I got like a law degree this year on public, private. I just had a lot of law that I had to go through. And what I will say is that as much as people might poo-poo it, I think by and large most laws are written with 1, good intent, and 2, when you really follow the letter of the law, it kind of makes sense. And so I want to crush everyone and play by the rules. And so once you know the rules, then you can almost play with more freedom because you just know where to avoid, right? Or basically you have to know what the rules are. I don't want to say so you can bend or break them because obviously we're talking about law, so. There. But you got to know the rules of the game that you're playing, and the law, as far as we're talking about business, those are the rules of the game. And so, how can we get into the game and try and win? We don't even know what we're playing by. And so that would say, that to me, it was like a big thing that happened this year that I would encourage you to just look at the laws that apply to your specific business or industry or partnerships and be very well acquainted with them. To the same degree, also rereading the contracts that you have in like your employment agreements, your partnership agreements. It's just good to know like what tools do I have at my disposal right now, and what expectations are do other people have of me that I'm unaware of. And that was hugely enlightening. And also, that has just allowed us to become better. And knowing these things has allowed.
Okay, man, this game is not as fun as trying to get damn boxes, man. So mini box, Predict of the Abyss. KOG worthy tanks. Fang Holaka. Chaotic soldiers. Lackluster soldier. How do you get this Book of Moon? Chaotic soldiers. Galaxy Eyes. Phantom of Rebellion. Two level 8 monsters you can. Galaxy Eyes. Costella Ptolemy.
Me to take what would otherwise be very stressful. I mean, imagine 8 losses, a lot of losses, right? Something that would otherwise be very stressful, and say, okay, I understand the variables. We will take these actions. I don't need to have any more cycles of this. Next thing. Because that's where the lawyer stuff will eat up your bandwidth. It eats up your shower time, it eats up your dinner time, it eats up when you're staring out the window when you're driving in the car. That's the cost of being in legal battles. But if you can minimize the cost of that by saying, I understand where the conflict is and I know what steps I'm going to take, and I have documentation to provide these things, you can actually circumvent the vast majority of the pain and suffering that goes along, which gives you a significant strategic advantage when you're in extended conflicts. All right, so next one. This one is probably a little more around my current stage of life, but this is that's what this is about. Right now, I'm shifting the way that I'm doing work, which is pretty significant. And so I will first put the disclaimer out there that you want to model the rise, not the the peak part. So to use an example that people can understand. You're like, oh, I want to get rich, so I should fly private. Don't fly private to get rich. It's something that people do once they're rich, right? If you want to get tall, don't play basketball. It's just that tall people play basketball. Very big difference, all right? And so this is the first year in my life where I hit my financial goals. Acquisition.com crushed it. Portfolio companies crushed it. Launch crushed it. Like we did really well this year. This was the biggest financial year that I've had in my career, including the years I've had income. And in light of that.
Okay, man. We're gonna try to get the Senju hands. Manju. Red Eyes Flank Dragon. Demise.
That I actually feel for the first time in my life that I haven't.
Okay, we'll see what we get. Kaiba got some ultra rare. This came out in 2022, 3 years ago. Nothing
And
special.
I know that sounds ridiculous. Some people, how could this now be?
I know what this is. Tune and sync monster. One or more tune monsters, blah blah blah. Okay. Try again. Timpex. So if we get something useful. We don't need that. Bum 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 bum. Demise. Demise, the king of Armageddon. 2 level 10 monsters you can detach from and inflict. Okay. You can ritual summon this card with Cycle of World. Need to spend more packs on this shit, man. Don't need that. Don't know what that is. Nope. We need the Manju thing, man. Bow 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 bow. So many cards in this game. Okay, we got 1 super rare, 1 ultra rare. They cannot be used as single. Once per turn, you can target one on the Facebook card. Destroy it, and if you do, set. Okay, not useful. Not useful. Not useful at all. I'm getting all the cards I don't need. Getting all the cards I do not need. Boom, 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 boom. Let's hope we get something useful. Okay, we got 1 of the cards. Manju, we got Manju. Only got 1 Manju. Okay, I finally got 1 Manju, which is what we need. Sort by most recent ones. Date obtained. Yes, we need more Manju. The Senju, Manju. When this card is normal, flip summon you can add. Whew. Bum, 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 bum. Cyber Angel.
But I would say that I've always had bigger goals than most people, but I also feel like I know when enough is enough for me. They just happen to be bigger than most people's goals. I do not have a permanently moving goalpost. Like, for example, I tend to be a little more muscular than most people are. But I got to a point where I was at 245, and I was like, this is a bit much. This is pretty big. I don't need to do more. Now, some people are like, I was getting bigger, I was getting bigger. I don't have that. I was like, I'm more muscular than most people even want to be, but I am muscular enough. And so, to the same degree, I probably have bigger financial goals than most people have, but I have finally achieved the things that I wanted to. Now, what am I going to do with business? It's not even going to end. It's just that the way that I'm playing the game is changing. And so, I'm relaying this. It's basically like flashing news. But I'm now shifting to planning my personal life first and allowing business to fill in the cracks. And I have such strong reinforcement cycles of having worked for so long, so many hours, that I have to unlearn how to work all the hours today. I wish I could say discipline and all that stuff. It's like I've been rewarded and reinforced for doing this for so long that it really is less effort for me to work on it than it is to stop working. And so that's kind of the path that I'm doing right now. And when I observe the people who are going from, you know, a billion, 10 billion, 10 billion beyond, you get past a point where you will be compensated for the quality of your judgment, not the quantity of your work. And so I feel like for the first time in my life, I've crossed that threshold for me, is that there is significantly higher leverage in my ability to pick and make correct bets. And if that becomes the highest leverage work that I have, then I have to reorient my life in a way that maximizes the quality of my decision making, which means that I probably will travel more. Why would traveling help the quality of my decision making? I'll gain more perspectives, more filters, more positions to consider a decision through. I will probably see more people than I have seen in the past because their perspectives will also help color and shade in the edges, give more dimension to the decisions I'm trying to make. I'll probably I'm trying to prioritize sleep a little more. I've never not prioritized sleep. I just I sleep until I can't and then I work, right? But I will probably be more proactive in doing some of those sleep hygiene things that are a little bit of a pain in the ass that can reach you at 10% or 20% more. I'm going to be doing that now. I will probably have more time that I will unplug on the weekend so that I can let my mind wander, so that I can think of kind of out of the box ideas. And this happened just recently, like 2 weeks ago. I had my EA team, they've changed my schedule a little bit so that there's even more free time than there was before, which there's already a lot of free time. But free time for me does not mean that nothing's happening, it means something's fine. And so because I had 2 days like back to back, I believe having an empty schedule allows me to do that which matters most. And I believe that the time of the CEO, the time of the founder is the most valuable asset or resource in the business. And so why would I not want the best allocator of the most expensive asset to be me? And so that's how they have blocked for me so that I maximize my free time. Now in that free time, put together a deal that will make us more than we probably did in power revenue this year. And I did it in basically 1 day with 6.5 hours on the phone, calling different people just because I slept well. I had the lowest resting heart rate I ever had, and I had the best sleep score I got in it was a record in my entire life. It was the best, well, the score only go 100, but like my resting heart rate and my HRV were the highest and lowest respectively they'd ever been. And I was like, I feel like I can see color today. And that quality of decision making at this point is the best strategic decision for me. And so in some ways maybe I still have the same objectives and I'm just working my life and maybe the next version of what success is like or what I have to change in order to become something where I think it can be to help most people. And so that is what you will see kind of going forward. And I have been in the stage that I was at from how I worked for the last 14 years. So this is a pretty significant change for me. But I'll be planning my life first and then business will fall. So a really powerful frame that I've been thinking about a lot has been, what do you want to have happen and what increases the chances of that happening? So here's the next lesson. 2 frames for reconsidering the hard decisions and conversations that you have to have. So let's say someone does something that you don't want them to do. They say something bad, something happens, right? Something that you have an innate reaction, which is that typically it's something called, it's a countermeasure, right? So if someone punishes you in some way, you want to counter punch them back. You want to counter control. You want to punish them so that you want to punish them even more so that they dare not punish you, right? But when we think about these 2 questions, which is what I want to happen, what do I want to happen? And number 2, what increases the odds of that happening? Oftentimes, your initial reaction, what you want to do, is almost antithetical to what you want to occur and what increases the chances of that happening. And so, for example, if someone says something bad to me online, I might have the immediate desire to go punish them publicly, right? What do I want to happen? I would like this person to move on with their lives and forget that I exist. That would be what I would want to have happen, right? Realistically. What increases the odds of that happening? Does me interacting with them, reinforcing the fact that they said that, increase those odds? No. I increase the likelihood that person hates me even more and does even more to try and damage me. So that would make my problem worse, not better. And so that is just a 2-step decision frame that I continue to use more and more and more, especially with interpersonal relationships. Hey, this employee is doing a bad job. I want to yell at them. What do I want to have happen? I want them to do a good job. Do I think yelling at them will increase the likelihood of that happening? No, I think they'll have more anxiety and probably decrease their performance. Okay, so that's not going to work. What do I want to happen? Okay, can I reward or publicly give them status for the one thing they've done well so that they can see some positive loop and then maybe they will do more of that thing? That probably does increase those odds. So I'll do that instead, even though I want to punish them for being a fuck-ass, right? And so what's interesting is that when I ask myself those questions, the thing that increases the odds of me getting what I ultimately want rarely is what I want to do. Or at least is rarely my initial gut reaction. And when I look at how most people live their lives, they live their lives from gut reaction, and then counter reaction, and they're just responsive. All they're doing is just they're like seaweed in the ocean. They're just moving, and they have no direction. They're just constantly going back and forth, right? And they're never getting what they want. And they think that life is chaotic. But when you actually ask yourself those questions, you typically can guess, no, I don't think that's actually going to increase the likelihood that happens. I think that person's going to hate me more if I do that, right? Then why will you do it, right? And so oftentimes when you use those 2 razors, one of the most common things that comes up, and it's now become an inside joke for me and some of my friends, is doing nothing at all is often the most productive.
black card frames are called Xyz monsters. Xyz monsters aren't part of your main deck. They begin the duel in your extra deck, a separate deck of up to 15 cards that you can special summon monsters from when you fulfill certain requirements. To special summon Xyz monsters from your extra deck, you need to control face-up monsters that have the same level. Check the Xyz monster you want to summon to see how many monsters you need, what level they need to be, and any other requirements. You can't use tokens. During your main phase, if you have the required monsters, declare which Xyz monster you're going to summon. Then, stack the required monsters on top of each other in a main monster zone. Or, if you aren't using an extra monster zone yet, you can stack them there instead. Finally, special summon the chosen Xyz monster face up in attack position or defense position on top of the stack of monsters. There are also spell cards. There are also spell cards that let you Xyz summon.
I activate rank up magic limited variance force. Time to overlay number 39 Utopia.
Many Xyz monsters have effects that tell you to detach an Xyz material from them. To do that, just take any one of the cards stacked beneath the Xyz monster and send it to the graveyard. Monsters with black card frames are called Xyz monsters. Xyz monsters aren't part of your main deck. They begin the duel in your extra deck, a separate deck of up to 15 cards that you can special summon monsters from when you fulfill certain requirements. To special summon Xyz monsters from your extra deck, you need to control face-up monsters that have the same level. Check the Xyz monster you want to summon to see how many monsters you need, what level they need to be, and any other requirements. You can't use tokens. During your main phase, if you have the required monsters, declare which Xyz monster you're going to summon. Then, stack the required monsters on top of each other in a main monster zone. Or, if you aren't using an extra monster zone yet, you can stack them there instead. Finally, special summon the chosen Xyz monster face up in attack position or defense position on top of the stack of monsters. This is called an Xyz summon. The monsters used to Xyz summon stay attached to the Xyz monster as Xyz materials while it's on the field, and go to the graveyard when the Xyz monster leaves the field. Some Xyz monsters also have an Xyz summon. The monsters used to Xyz summon stay attached to the Xyz monster as Xyz materials while it's on the field, and go to the graveyard when the Xyz monster leaves the field. Some Xyz monsters also have special methods of Xyz summoning that you can use instead of using the required number of monsters with the same level.
Go Chaos Xyz Evolution.
If you have a monster like that, carefully read and follow the instructions on that card.
I give you Utopia Ray.
There are also spell cards that let you Xyz summon.
I activate rank up magic limited variance force. Time to overlay number 39 Utopia.
Many Xyz monsters have effects that tell you to detach an Xyz material from them. To do that, just take any one of the cards stacked beneath the Xyz monster and send it to the graveyard.
Attack. Xyz.
Monster leaves the field. Some Xyz monsters also have special methods of Xyz summoning that you can use instead of using the required number of monsters with the same level.
Go Chaos Xyz Evolution.
If you have a monster like that, carefully read and follow the instructions on that card.
I give you Utopia Ray.
There are also spell cards that let you Xyz summon.
I activate rank up magic limited variance force. Time to overlay number 39 Utopia.
Many Xyz monsters effects that tell you to detach an Xyz material from them. To do that, just take any one of the cards stacked beneath the Xyz monster and send it to the graveyard.
Attack with Shock Stream Blast!
Xyz monsters don't have levels like regular monsters. Their stars represent a stat called rank. Ranks and levels are not the same. Cards that affect monsters of a certain level won't affect an Xyz monster with the same number of stars.
Damn it, man, this game is too complicated. How to synchro summon?
Monsters with white card frames are called synchro monsters. Synchro monsters aren't part of your main deck. They begin the duel in your extra deck. A separate deck of up to 15 cards that you can special summon monsters from when you fulfill certain requirements. Before you can summon a synchro monster, you need to control face-up monsters that match the requirements listed on the synchro monster you want to summon, whose total levels equal the level of the synchro monster you want to summon. Exactly one of those monsters must be a tuner. The level of the synchro monster requirements listed on the synchro monster you want to summon, whose total levels equal the level of the synchro monster you want to summon. Exactly one of those monsters must be a tuner. Then, during your main phase, declare which synchro monster you want to summon and send the appropriate monsters to the graveyard. Then, special summon the declared synchro monster from your extra deck, face up, in attack position or defense position in one of your main monster zones. If you aren't currently using an extra monster zone, you can summon it to an extra monster zone instead. This is called a synchro summon. Most synchro monsters don't require you to use any specific monsters, but some do. And the required monster is...
Okay, that's too complicated. So I need the... what's it? Phantom Galaxy Eye Sleepy Dragon. Apparently this is a good card. I don't know if there's anything else in here. Phantom Knights. Phantom Knights. Phantom Knight's Cloak. Well, I guess I'll open it. Phantom Knights of Ancient Cloak. When this, you can target one dark monster. Apparently this is the strongest deck. Strongest deck. Nothing useful. Nothing useful, seriously? Or just regulars? Boom, 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 boom. Hello, hello. You can't really see my face on this camera. I might just stream from another live. I'll stream on my phone. I'll stream on my phone.
This is what I would do.
Stream on my phone. And now. Okay. Still nothing useful. Okay, hello. We can play Duel Links, man. I don't know what I played for. Oh, I got it. I got it. I got the Cypher Dragon thing. I got the dragon. Some other rare. No. Okay, finally got one rare. Galaxy Eyes Cypher Dragon. What, the CCG? Okay. It's not very fun though, that game. I've also played it too. I've also played that. Phantom Knights is probably the strongest deck. The strongest. Phantom Knights. It's boring, yeah, it's not fun. Have you tried the Polytopia game? I think Polytopia is more fun, but it's addicting. Very addicting. Forbidden Chalice, target 1 move. Polytopia is on the phone. It's on the phone and PC. Let's see. Constella. 32 main box. Dark Rebellion. Phantom of Rebellion. Okay, I got the card. There's another one. Dark Rebellion Dragon. Yeah, Battle Polytopia. Okay, we got one of the Phantom Knights. One of the Phantom Knights. Got another Phantom Knight. Getting the X super rares now. It's pretty addicting though. It's a strategy game, but I think it's I feel like it's more made for adults. I think a lot of the games are made for children. Like Yu-Gi-Oh's made for children. Okay. Got a lot of the super rares. Few Cypher Dragons, blah blah blah. Oracle of Zephyr. Phantom Knight of the Break Sword. You can special summon this monster. Phantom Knight. Death Note. Okay. Idison, Conquer of the Stars. No, we don't need that. Don't need this. Idison. Phantom of Silent Boots. So we got one of that. Heavy forward. Infinite drag.打了。
你为什么会觉得冷？我都觉得挺奇怪。
6度啊，不冷。
一点都不冷，今年的天气。
啊？
你要不能去买一个邮局那个 post office 大的 post 买一个，你知道？那个阿叉那个很多人，他就是经营那个 post office， 我不知道。
你可以问 AI 这会不会赚钱啊？
我说你可以做啊，他需要英语很好的人，然后他会请很多鬼佬做工作。要不然你都没事情做，天天待在家里。
Is usually.
actually, no, I think we might commit here. Let's continue this conversation.
Yes.
And so, genuinely, I think in B2B, which is a large part of the economy, it never gets the same attention.
Okay, I got this dragon. Okay, we've got a Phantom Knight with the Ancient Cloak.
I think that
Okay, we got the card. We got the card.
not only Zoom meetings, but webinars, live video, the fact that actually small entities can be major video players.
Yeah.
I think that's a highly important fact. And there's a guy, Nick Bloom at Stanford, who's studying this in detail. Julia Hobsbawm, very brilliant woman, is also studying the new world of work. But the attention and the investment it's receiving in terms of studying how do you do this well, how do you do hybrid work well, how do you do it badly, what are the healthy findings in terms of increasing productivity, or where does it reduce productivity? We should be discussing these things for an hour a week, and nobody is.
That is really interesting. One of the things you touched on there,
By the way, I said to the Department of Transport, the price of about 7 miles of motorway, you could give everybody in the UK premium Zoom access.
yeah,
Okay? Now, unfortunately, they're called the Department of Transport, not the Department that's not moving people around very much. But it strikes me that the best thing the Department of Transport can do is to remove unnecessary journeys from the rails and the roads.
Yeah.
But in Finland, we have a Department of Transport and Connectivity, which strikes me as a fundamentally intelligent thing to do, because you recognise the fact that electronic things are to some extent either complementary or substitutes for physical movement.
yeah.
You can transmit things electronically, you can transmit things physically, and therefore maybe you need Wi-Fi on trains rather than faster trains to replace mantras.
No, well, AI.
But I don't think in the UK, I don't think that's joined up thinking. I think we've got a massive silo problem.
Yeah, yeah.
是不是有一个好的生意
Yes, that's my idea of that side of things. Why do you think? I mean, I asked about.
Is a post office a good business to buy?
This question is why you need marketing.
Yeah.
Because status quo bias is so strong. I used to think
No.
marketing was most effective.
我就觉得不是一个好生意。
不是好的呢。
你问看他答案，他说 no，一般是 no。
但是 S 很多人做的，也不是
赚的钱不
很
多，赚的钱不多。
Then I realized that when you have a really, really big idea, a big idea
Post office 给你的钱是很低，你做很多东西，但是赚的钱是很少。
proof like this, okay? The best idea anybody's ever had.
很多人只赚25K 到 30K，
Best idea any single person.
很多人做不一定是好啊，很多人
我
开餐
说你做
馆，
老板，不是说工作的人。
Massive psychological.
他就是我就是问他开这个生意是不是好的，我不是问他在那边上班啊。
Because they require a lot of people to change their minds.
Yeah.
And you can see,
但是
where it works well. Same
他主要就是
然后他给你答案，
他就是主要是稳定的收入嘛。
handled absolutely brilliantly.
我也不知道，但是我感觉不会赚钱从这个。你赚2磅一个油，你赚多少从那油电局？
But really big important ideas, I used to think sold themselves. And I now realize it's completely the opposite. That the bigger the idea, the more effort you need to make.
Yeah.
The opposition to the car is absolutely fascinating, by the way. My distant cousin Woodrow Wilson, when he was, I think, person to Princeton, he went to
他说少数情况可以买，就是如果你买了很便宜，就是这家店，
display of ostentatious wealth.
或者他有别的东西可以赚，更会赚钱。
Whole period where the
那个超市了还是什么？
pretty solid good idea. You can now travel at 50 miles an hour rather than 3. The mobile phone. Okay, I can remember.
他 AI 说不适合我的性格，
Street, when I used a mobile phone in Oxford Street in 1989, two people showed.
我想做的东西。
So this idea that you have a big idea won't need marketing, will take care of itself. Absolutely the opposite of the truth.
Let's talk about cars because I think it's interesting reflection. The society has changed in the last 20 or 30 years or so, right? And we can come on to gender as well. But it used to be that we lived in a very individualistic world. People would personalise the back of their cars. You have bumper stickers, etc. Now, the vast majority of cars are basically black, silver, or
Yeah,
blue.
grey. Yeah.
Yeah, and but it's kind of I just find it a really strange.
It's very interesting, the Ford Mustang, Mackie, the electric Mustang, and indeed the petrol Mustang are going counter-trend on that. And are actually, they're realising that actually there's a segment of the population. There's a whole extraordinary study on why that happened. A little bit of it is resale value. The cars were sold on this kind of, lease hire agreement, okay? The car dealer is obliged to take back the car at a set price after 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
Therefore, if you order a car in pink, which you can technically do, you'll come across massive resistance because they know that they'll be lumbered with a pink car in 4 years' time, and the resale problem is theirs, not yours. Okay.
Yeah.
But there is something rather tragic about it. By the way, the sort of I'm not interested in cars phenomenon is very much confined to London, New York,
Yes.
places where there's huge public transport. By the way, I also think there's something rather important, which is if you don't drive fairly frequently, driving isn't very enjoyable. It's actually quite stressful.
Yeah.
And I know that because whenever I pick up a hire car from the airport, which is an unfamiliar car, the first few hours I spend driving in it, I'm on edge.
Best creamy
Okay,
texture
if
and
it's my own
taste.
car, and I drive it every day, it's actually joyously enjoyable.
Yeah.
Now, if you're in London, not only is driving in London horrible, but the people in London don't drive very frequently, so they also hate driving.
Yeah.
And so you get this kind of feedback effect where central London basically creates non-drivers.
Yeah.
Because I imagine if you haven't driven for 3 months and you take the train to Reading and you pick up a car daily, okay, the first hour of your driving, even if you were previously an experienced driver, is pure chaos.
Yeah.
And so once you move out of London, you drive every day, if only to the station, okay, it becomes system one, and it becomes a flow state. And actually, one of the interesting things about research into happiness, when you look at people's sort of happiness and well-being minute by minute, is how much people enjoy driving, which is something, by the way, which I don't think the driverless car movement has fully clocked, which is that we like a feeling of control.
Yeah.
So whereas the driverless car movement says that well, Silicon Valley becomes the worst traffic in the world.
Yeah.
Okay, you know, the driverless car movement in, let's say, if you live on the West Coast of Scotland or on the A9, you know, where driving on empty roads is a form of sheer delight. Not quite the same benefit, is it?
Yeah, yeah.
You know.
That's really interesting.
I'm very pro car, and I'm totally with what Dyson is, but it's actually a very keen and very able driver. And particularly because I'm very pro car, but I live outside London, he tends to be anti-car.
Yeah.
But we reached a very, very good accommodation, which is, look, what we need to do in behavioural terms is simply increase everybody's repertoire for different transport modes. So in other words, their use of transport is less habitual and consequently more effective. And I've got a very simple solution to that. Put the annual car tax list. Okay, here's even better. You introduce road pricing, okay, but you get 50% of the money you spend on road pricing back in public transport vouchers.
Okay.
Okay, or you make the tax list £300 a year, but you get £400 of rail tax. Now you make an exception for people that live in Wales and North Scotland, where the public transport's kind of hopeless.
Yeah.
But what that's doing is saying, it's actually fine to use the roads, but it's not fine to use the roads to the exclusion of anything else.
Yeah.
You should at least be familiar enough with rail travel to see it as an alternative as part of your repertoire, rather than defaulting to learn more.
Yeah.
There's no right answer. If I'm getting Manchester, do I drive or do I take the train? Well, it depends how much luggage I have, how many hours ago, what's the weather like, what time of day do I need to travel, how long am I staying for? Okay? If I'm staying for 1 night, Uber basically replaces the need to have a car. If you're staying for a week, you're going to drive. Yeah. Okay? There aren't right answers to any of these things. So the dogmatic people who say you must shift from mode A to mode B, you know, and fairly take account of people with sons, people with young children, all kinds of reasons, bad weather, etc. But what we can reasonably say as a good explanation for transport policy is to get more people to actually experience more modes.
Yeah.
I'd like to get back to the London buses, but I've never made the cognitive effort to actually master the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I love talking about the idiots who design buses only put the number of the final destination in front of the bus. I don't know, most people aren't going to the final destination.
Yeah.
The fact that the thing ends in Clapton Ponds and no on the bus, but that's what they display on the front of the bus. I don't know, if it goes via St Pancras, Charing Cross, Cannon Street, Victoria, Farringdon, Blackfriars or London Bridge, that bus can get you home. But that's not displayed on the bus. You get 2% extra GDP just by improving things like signposting and messaging. If you get one would it be interesting? Very good question. Only if I can do it for 5 years. Right. Because I don't think the problem with all these jobs is it takes you about a year to master the brief anyway, by which time you can reshuffle into junior treasury secretary or whatever. But yes, I think you could do, if you made it a 5-year thing and you actually introduce things like citizens' assemblies, you know, really, really intelligent discussion about where the investment goes. I mean, I did meet Steve Norris, and we had a wonderful discussion. He was from a major administration. And but in fact, he came from industry, didn't he?
Yeah.
What you need actually is you need more people in politics. This is a terrible thing again. Look, it's silly. Because when talking to people with behavioural insights, they love working with wrong chaps. Because having been a bit of a salesman, he instinctively understood this stuff. Whereas everybody else who's been trained in PPE, okay, is massively resistant. They basically see marketing as cheating. Okay? Right? So you need a few more Steve Norrises and wrong chaps kicking around. Okay? Yeah, maybe a tiny bit wide. So I would be unashamedly wide if I was to do that job. But I think you could. With actually take public opinion with you.
Yeah.
If you were allowed enough publicity, you know, I'd probably open up a massive YouTube channel and do the thing that way. Now, admittedly, that'd be some trillion comments and abuse because I think that's the problem with politics on social media. But I think you could genuinely do something really, really.
Yeah, but I think building a business or government via YouTube and social media would be much
But
better.
housing would be another one. Because I think you can psychologically, part of the housing crisis is a psychological one. NIMBYism. How do you get people? At the moment, there's a fundamental problem for next door neighbour wants to build a loft extension or a house in London. You know that they're making £200,000 for getting planning permission, whereas you're putting up with a load of inconvenience and getting zilch. there's a very, very strong psychological thing, which is we have evolved to practice cooperation. But with that evolution to practice beneficial cooperation, we have a very strong instinct against what you might call the adopted mentor instinct, against any arrangement where one person gets all the gains and you get all the downside. And so that would be a really, really interesting area of exploration.
We touched on social media there. It strikes me one of the big things that's changed in marketing, or the growth of, is sort of personal. It's something you might not set out to master, but
not only did I not set out to do it, it most fun, and I never thought I didn't exactly have the demographics or indeed the physique of a likely TikTok star who I would do it.
no, but how have you found that sort of like that sort of extension of marketing and the rise of personal branding after 20 years? I mean, it's always been there.
I mean, influence campaigns always existed. I mean, I met someone whose grandfather worked for the Electricity Supply Board, which is the Irish body back in the 1920s and 30s, responsible for encouraging people to electrify their homes.
Yeah.
And his social media influencer campaign was rather brilliant. Every month he gave the priest a bottle of whiskey on condition that in his sermons the priest would mention occasionally how much he'd go against this. So this is new. It's just amplified.
Yeah.
David Ogilvy in his book on advertising, refers to this story of a man who was doubled over in pain with indigestion, and a man who rolls Royce drives up and tells him he needs Andrew's liver salts, and the person was the king's doctor. Okay, this was a story that went round. So he's I'm also trying to instigate a new practice on podcasts, which is I think the guest should get to plug something as well as the host.
Definitely.
And what I'm trying to do is bring back the permanent local cinema hours, where the guest just plugs their favourite local restaurant or something. So if you want better food in Sevenoaks, try recommend Budari. Or indeed try Buses Bites, which is West Room's best and the only Jamaican Italian cafe. But one of the things I'm trying to do is actually instigate that more, because I think it'd be quite fun if podcast guests got to do a little bit of recommendation as well. Because they're the people that But no, it is fascinating. I mean, it is fascinating. It's also fascinating because I think something happens with everything from TikTok to YouTube, which we didn't fully notice. Jimmy Carr rather brilliantly put it when he said YouTube became the biggest TV channel in the world and nobody noticed. What's happened with TikTok, YouTube, etc., is they've reached such an enormous scale of content that they're now searchable. I don't think you spotted that happening. In the early days of my YouTube use, it was let's see if there's anything worth watching. Okay? It was a bit like going to TK Maxx. You don't go to TK Maxx with specific purchases in mind.
Yeah.
You go to have a shifty around to see if there's anything worth buying.
Yeah.
And then what happened is when you reach a certain scale, you become searchable. Now what's fascinating is young people search TikTok all the time. That never occurred to me before. But the idea that actually TikTok and YouTube are now, so YouTube is effectively Wikipedia for video.
Yeah.
Okay, that wasn't the case 10 years ago. And I think that's a really interesting change in terms of how all this content gets consumed. But when it passed us by.
Well, I think that. I mean, I think social media advertising is pretty well formed. I think there is an element of brands creating their own TV shows, their own long-form content, which is you're seeing the early stages of that. But it's
Yeah, I think whether you like it or not, if you're a marketer, you're a broadcaster.
Yeah.
And I don't know how, and that means that actually one of the interesting things is that when you've got to attract attention rather than buy attention, when you're doing commercial advertising, you need essentially to use the normal rules. In other words, the rules for creating attention that generates its own audience are fundamentally different. And it also requires you, I think, to be much more oblique. It raises interesting questions about brand personality. It raises very interesting questions about things like in ads. How always there were very, very great investments which kind of use the capital effect, where they kind of admit it as failures or perhaps present the brand as not perfect, something like that kind. But I mean, the level of honesty and candour, is different. And so, there's always context, and advertising has to adapt to the fact that context really, really matters. And how you communicate in one context is largely different from how you communicate in others. And I think the third observation, which is that the extraordinary success of podcasts reveals actually a market failure among broadcasters. In that broadcasters became, first of all, they probably undervalued conversation as a form of content too readily. In other words, they're obsessed with drama or game shows or whatever it is. Now, if you think about it, conversational storytelling, other than maybe dance and sport, would be the oldest human art forms. They're ingrained in us, effectively. And also, the fascinating fact is the best thing that astrologers ever tell me is there aren't trends, there are vectors. And what the astrologers meant by that is we tend to talk about a trend, which is X is going to Y. What is more common is actually that X is going to Y and the opposite of Y. And so what you see is a huge increase in a very, very long form. In the 3 hour podcasting, Offset, Binge on Netflix, and also very, very short. And one of the problems I think with professional broadcasting can compartmentalize into these half-hour sets. There was a couple of early experiments in the Norwegian state broadcaster and their second channels, like Norwegian BBC Two, quite early on started experimenting with slow TV. I think it's 24 hours devoted to wood, which is very Norwegian. And a large part of it was just showing wood burning. and then it showed people chopping and sawing wood. This created a massive scandal because apparently when you store firewood bark up or bark down, it's one of those weird polarizing online things in Norway, which absolutely divides public opinion. But that was actually rather lovely. I mean, you know, it was broadcasted going, okay, we're experimenting with all these formats, but the actual time length, you know, isn't as good. So I think what happens is the skill set disappears. I've got my brother-in-law writes for example, various BBC TV entertainment. He said the number of people who can write for 2 hours with no ads. Okay? In some ways, television writing, you get very, very optimized around a particular kind of length or format. They say the whole plotting thing, the whole, all those devices become very, very different skills when you've got 2 ad-free hours. Chunk of 35 minutes at a time.
Exactly. And I think it's interesting because we talked about this sort of like life goes beyond the casting etc. I think it's like advertising is probably a lot of it's a skill that's atrophy, and it's still the long copy press ad, okay, is still I love many products in many brand categories, the car category, the electric car category, where people effectively need an argument, they need more information than is just provided by them. And the extent to which that skill works just is worrying because sometimes it's the only thing that works. Yeah. The apex of some of this stuff we talk about podcast, personal brand, etc. I think is like it's like he himself is a personal brand. You know, he's got his message out last few weeks on our podcast, which is then split up for social media as well. That's
That's what I love about the 2016 election. I had a friend who had said that every single person in academia thought that Hillary Clinton was except the primatologists. The primatologists study apes, gorillas, chimpanzees, etc. They all knew Trump was going to win. And it does come down to weird, like body language and stuff. It comes down to weird. There is an interesting thing, okay, which is well, a few interesting things. One of the things I found hysterical about the US election, where you realise how what you might call elite opinion is becoming completely out of touch, was when someone in Madison, wasn't Madison Square Garden, there was a comedian who made a joke about women. It was University League on the channel after that, he's completely lost the Latinx. He's completely lost the Latinx. Because the idea, that's as absurd as saying if someone told an anti-Trump, anti-French joke, it would offend the British, which would be identified as European. Latin Americans, okay, they're much more nationalistic than they have a sense of Latino solidarity. Cubans, for example, and Mexicans would have found that joke hysterically funny. And it was just this idea of how many people are seeing the world through these bizarre and arbitrary kind of ethnic lenses. Because you actually, you know, if you watch Narcos, okay, Mexicans and Colombians, it's partly by the way just a cultural move. It's not that they necessarily hate each other, but it's a much, much more forthright culture in terms of banter. Because English is more sensitive to banter than British. So they're pretty familiar with the
切掉才1小块，
什么一小块？
这个
哦
每，次都没营养了，那为什么？鱼又不是不一样。
Actually, what was weird is the Democrats were paying for how much sincerity do you have about your political beliefs? If you go, yeah, I'll support your campaign, but that actually is actually a self-policing endorsement. But it's really interesting because in terms of getting nearly all the polls were wrong, so a colleague of mine in the United States with the WPP had what you might call the marketing data on Trump versus Harris. And the marketing data just showed that Trump's voltage, which is a technical term used by the Brand Mass evaluator, Trump's voltage was way, way higher. He certainly in Canada about 5 years. So there were other votes in market research which were much more closer. One of the cleverest ones was not asking people what they would vote, it was asking people what they thought their neighbours would vote for, which was an ingenious little lateral hack. Because when they ask a question about ourselves, our question is what do you say about this question, not what the other person is question. Would you prefer the team to have campaign, caviar, or KFC? Okay? Your first thought is, I better not say KFC, because it makes you look real sophisticated. But deep down, when you're walking past the fucking repository, you're going to turn left, okay? And so that was an ingenious kind of direction of research, which I thought was very, very clever. It's a brilliant way of just taking one component, one distorting component out of the information.
Yeah, that's really, it's really interesting. And but it will be interesting to see whether that still works in 4 years' time. Because as many, there's now a bit of herd mentality. That sort of lateral hack to
By the way, the Democrats, there's something there. I always describe the difference between ITV and Channel 4 and the BBC. Somehow, okay, when you watch Channel 4, when you watch ITV, you kind of get the impression that the people who make these programs kind of like their audience. They have a kind of affection. Okay, the person who really felt liked his audience is Shakespeare, right? Because you have a whole panoply of characters, some of whom are fat and drunken and ridiculous, but you feel that Shakespeare actually loved humanity in all its kind of variety. You have that slight feeling. The Democrats have a lot of that. You don't actually feel very much of the public. And little places like Drax or, I'm speaking of those kind of things, you actually feel it. And it's a feeling, it's not really about what you say, about the body language or anything. If you bumped into Donald Trump, it doesn't drink, but if you bumped into him, he probably would have a chat.
Yeah, fantastic. Because that's classic. Very positive. I think Trump yes. Fan club, classic.
He would like to have it. Yeah. And actually, someone wants to describe Irish politics as feeling gay or a bit more confident, but you rather have a pint with being a father, apparently. That's basically Irish politics. But it is something which is hard to actually yes. One interesting thing I there is a fascinating aspect, which I think explains the popularity, which is that if you don't have a political gathering, most of the important people there, particularly looking over there to give us shelter, in case someone more important for people. And you go to one of those events, and Nigel Farage is having a chat with our staff, and he's entirely absorbed with his attention. Okay? And something about the public, I think, is fundamentally, they're antennae to pick up on that.
Yeah.
Now, if you think about it, if you go back to chimpanzees, okay, there is a fundamental kind of instinct there, which is, in other words, is this person, I'm going to call this person kind of silverback gorilla status. You know, it's not what I think about them, what I think is about me. And that was probably Bethel Mark Fox was having a Starbucks in the UK. He was like, and he said, listen, you're totally racist. So I picked up one great thing, what me, with somebody else said, which is, it's not just about what people think about rap, it's what they think and think about them.
Yeah.
You don't hear that kind of thing, which is, you don't hear that stuff, which is overly contentious. I would say, the French thing with French hotels, okay, is sure they are the kind they are, but when you take all the French hotels, you just get a higher level of patronization.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of truth in that. You go to the most spanking places, and you feel he was their customer being slightly disdained, you know.
It is
The Democrats, if they just, and to be honest, they're just terribly bad at finding candidates. I mean, it always feels like a shoe-in or a coronation. Okay? You know, that was Bernie gets, basically. And there are people, I don't feel that there are people like Bernie and Elizabeth Warren, who I find unbelievably impressive. Those are great, I find really interesting. But for some reason, Americans don't think they're mad.
I'm going to put something else as well, because I'm genuinely really interested in it, which is your marketing skills, and how you, as a personal brand, now, like, you could do a marketing campaign. No, you're not. Well, you're going to kick back.
I hope how I'm seeing is a behavioural science impresario and marketing evangelist. So I do have my mission, my personal brand is a byproduct of my purpose, I was going to say, okay, which is that I want marketing considerations to come to the forefront in everything from policy making to new product development to business investment. I want the psychological component to be not dominant, but upfront. Okay, at the moment, it's left clear.
One of my girls came to me and said, I want to do marketing at university, fine, but I would far rather they did your kind of master's course. Talk to us why you do it, what it is, etc.
I think at a very simple level, I think that not cherishing in education and indeed in the business world is a kind of pseudoscience of fake determinism. Okay, pretending things that are quantifiable when they're not, pretending things that are formulaic and predictable when they're anything but. To counterbalance this bias in decision making, where actually we've evolved mental styles which are designed to win arguments, not to solve problems. Two actually quite different. Solving a problem might be highly experimental. Winning an argument means you have to pretend to be right. Solving a problem might be, it could be one of these three things, let's go and find out some more. The need to pretend, which is bolstered by the idea that the internet or AI the need to pretend that we already have the information we need, therefore we must be able to come up with a decisive recommendation on the spot without further inquiry, is leading to very, very bad mental habits. Now, marketing, because of necessity, you have to be a problemist and an imaginative thinker in marketing. You're not trying to be right, you're trying to be interesting, that's wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. Because of that, it's a very, very good ground in thinking differently. The mental practices we need to adopt to solve the world's problems, or indeed commercial problems, or small personal problems, are the kind of mental habits that have been honed through our educational system, which is all about mass question and the single right answer. A multiple choice IQ test really bother me. Why? Because once you become multiple choice, there has to be a single right answer. A large component of human intelligence must reside in the ability to solve problems where there isn't a single right answer, and the correct answer is it depends, or one of these three. Okay, right? Now, multiple choice doesn't allow that mode of thinking. And so The thing I would also do is I'd read all the Sherlock Holmes short stories. I read a book called Obvious Adams by Robert Brown, published in 1916. It's only about 50 pages long, but it was one of the kind of epiphanies in my life for reading that book. Partly because it was, hold on a second, what this means is that most people don't seem inspired by default. And the way in which I probably thought by default was next normal work, which also explained my reading something. Okay, I also read detective fiction in general, because if you look at police detective work, it's a very, very good analogy for problem solving, all kinds of fields, genetic diagnosis to creative problem solving. And the reason for that is that cops, I think in some ways cops are more scientific than scientists are. Because scientists are only interested in the evidential, whereas cops, before they have the evidential phase of an investigation, where you prove the guy's guilty, cops have this prior phase, which you might call investigating. Now, what's the most cop question? Okay, somebody gets killed, some guy dies. You go to a court and you ask, did anybody notice anything unusual on the matter of the same completely open-ended question, okay? You'll do the other stuff, you'll do the DNA, etc. But you also maintain this open mind, which is if anybody knows anything, the fact that someone drove past 3 times in the right van, okay, there's no evidence, you can't bang someone up life for driving around in a funny way. But it's highly significant because it tells you where to direct your attention next.
Yeah.
Sarah Sanders brought into a parking ticket. Okay, Peter Sutcliffe was partly caught, in large part because 2 beat cops noticed that he parked the wrong way round. Now, the wrong way round apparently the Brighton red light district means in a red light district you normally can't penny tip. You know you're still in the Brighton red light district, you want to blend in. Okay, you park with your windscreen facing the wall because nobody can see what's happening on the back seat. And Sutcliffe parked as if to make a bit getaway with his windscreen facing the road. Now the cops just thought, you noticed that. 99.9% of the population never noticed that. It's an act of supreme creative observation. Now, I don't know who this guy was. There's another guy called DC Andy Laptune who spotted Sutcliffe early. Again, it's a very, very small detail when doing hashtag interviews. But cultivating that kind of cop mentality, where you're looking out for anything that might have no evidential value. It's not enough on which to base a decision, but it's something on which you can base further inquiry. And that strikes me as the mentality, actually, spending some time with the police might not be a bad thing.
That is a wonderful way to finish. Thank you very much.
Absolute pleasure.
To the future.
那这个可能在幻想，他可以用这5个法官啊，然后做成最后的决策者，不惜来做释宪。宪法第4条，国家领土范围，你以为他们不敢吗？拍够。这一条陈婉珍提过释宪，当时的大法官会议认为这个是政治议题，他们不接受。陈婉珍提的释宪案就是中华民国领土范围的释宪案第4条。如果赖清德真的要搞台独，要搞中华民国独立，他搞不好立法院不会过，修宪也不可能，就给你搞释宪模式。所以你是讲到要害啊，你是讲到要害啊，所以浩宇啊，你这个一语惊醒梦中人啊，这个5个人。深绿的党棍啊，大法官啊，那就结案了。中华民国领土的释宪案，他们就可以做出释宪解释啊，说只有台澎金马，这个事实上就等于法理台独。你可以想象两岸会出什么事。中国大陆的红线很简单嘛。法理台独，那你台湾共和国做不到啊，修宪也做不到啊，我用释宪可以吧？所以你提醒了大家，感谢你，你提醒了大家赖清德的终极大阴谋，用5个御用法官来释宪，把中华民国的领土范围。限缩到台澎金马，法理独立完成，那就等着两岸打仗吧。那就是这种人啊。陈明礼，对不起，我有个愚蠢问题啊，丢烟雾弹烟那么多，为什么消防安全设备没有喷水？坦白讲，我真的不知道，有可能是。
When the pension system was invented, it was a social contract. A social contract that said
可能是温度啊， 个消防的安全设备啊，它可能不只是测烟呐、它也要测温度的。那因为它没有烧起来嘛，这个是我猜啦。因为坦白讲，那个烟雾弹如果是彩色烟哦，这个在很多庆典都用过。如果烟味来喷水，那怎么用啊？所以我猜是这样。棉花糖庞德莱尔就是为了要羞辱他，怎么了吗？Golden 遇到坏人马上逃，逃不了就躲，躲不了就站，要站就用辣椒水，轻轻一喷，连比特犬都叫爷爷问题是他那个刀很长你那个辣椒水要够到他，你的手可能就被砍了，因为他那个刀蛮长的。这个还是不要轻易去搞了，这个。尤其是他是这个人，张文是长得比较矮那如果是像郑杰那种身高呢，那拿着长刀呢，这个辣椒水恐怕派不上用场。这个莫毅，民进党为何会如此惧怕美国，让人玩弄，不敢吭声，毫无国格可言？不然是敢当着中国人面攻打台湾吗？我跟你讲，你小国就是要左右逢源嘛。那你跟中国大陆已经完全没有对话空间了，你当然只能一面倒是你自己造成的嘛。你去看东南亚的国家嘛，菲律宾也类似台湾嘛，搞到自己都没有空间嘛，没有筹码。你看韩国、越南、新加坡，人家多聪明的，两边关系都不错所以他为什么怕美国？
Business is problems. It's competing bets on different visions of the future. The richest and one of the most intelligent companies in the world has just spent a few billion developing Apple Vision Pro, with genuinely no clue as to whether it's the future of computing or a load of old bombs.
Roosevelt is one of the most original thinkers in business.
The problem with Britain is that we were a very, very successful country of creators, inventors, and pirates, and the pirates and inventors were so successful that their grandchildren became accountants.
He built his career by questioning everything: how we sell, how we market, and how we make decisions.
There are people who think that Jaguar is mad, and there are people who think Jaguar might be onto something.
In this episode, Rory breaks down why businesses fail, why great ideas don't sell themselves, and why marketing is the most misunderstood part of business.
The car is absolutely fascinating. It took me 50 years to get full acceptance. Really big ideas require a lot of marketing, because they require a lot of people to change their minds.
If you want to know how to win in business and understand the hidden psychology behind success, this is an episode for you.
刚愎自用的家伙，
Rory, welcome to
支
the
持的
What pleasure.
都
Do
是
you
有
remember
问
the
题
first time
的
we，met? Probably not.
音
It was
调比较
the
低
Design
的。
Museum in 2016.
Absolutely right. There was a
这我有什么办
I
法？
think I gave, wasn't it?
Yes, and it was a government minister got up and gave quite a sort of grand speech, and there was a sort of room of hundreds of thousand people, and he got up and just grabbed it, and I was like,
你台湾没有办法
so
独立，
naturally, so I was able to walk over and sort of say, you're going to see the etc. Be very sort of chat.
你都就是为了维持现状，
Watching you make
让你维持一个比较好的
Well, personally,
谈判
I
的
think
地位
business is entertaining.
所以你
But
两
the
边
most
关系
effort
要
of
拉得
business
不
is
错
devoted to actually
或
entertaining
者
it
是
is.
中国大陆跟
You believe this. I think what's happened is that business tends to promote through the war deterministic thinking, which basically makes business formulaic and tedious. Whereas of course business is probabilistic. It's a casino. It's competing bets on different visions of the future. There are people who think that Jaguar is mad, and there are people who think Jaguar might be onto something. And there are people who think that, look, okay, the richest and one of the most intelligent companies in the world has just spent a few billion developing Apple Vision Pro, with genuinely no clue as to whether it's the future of computing or a load of bombs. Okay, that's literally how you see it. And I find it so interesting. You don't kind of cover all these things. It's not part of our culture. It is a bit more in the States. It is much more in the States. Also, marketing is much more, which is the interesting. Marketing and innovation are interesting and non-deterministic, probabilistic parts of business. And the problem with Britain is that we were a very, very successful country of creative inventors and pirates. And the pirates and inventors were so successful that their grandchildren became accountants fundamentally. And business is really epic, or the economist. Marketing does not feature from one week to the next.
两个人经常买的日币，
Marketing is half of
对
innovation.
他跌
It's
到
one thing to have a good
我
product,
记得我
but
今
you
天
know,
是
the
买
actual
150的
behavioural change necessary to get people to adopt it is arguably the more difficult part of the problem.
yeah.
生
And
血
yet, so if you read the economist, the economist in fact many years ago, marketing was London who hated marketing.
但是高
So
盛
the
不止
economist
不
the
止
economist
天
goes
了高
outside.
达20兆
Yeah,
的
evolutionary
总预算，
biologists. And evolutionary
还
biologists
准备这周
is
要
something clear.
送
They
牛
understand
死人就
marketing,
到了
because they
120
understand
兆，
animals and
一
plants
般
need
年
to
度预算
understand.
来大傻逼，
It's
这
really
种军
fascinating.
事已经要像
Yeah,
鹰在
you
无
talk about
敌
your
的俄罗斯，
yeah,
一条腿。
yeah.
我跟你讲啊，
But you got it.
日
喂，一来啦，
I think it was lucky
都
because
抖音眼啦，
they were probably for
你简单不看你么参加干？
I think there was an easy decision. I think I was probably the fourth group draft.
去啊
One of the things that
你看eBay 你看我参加出来冇啊？
we're all reminded about the fourth is let's go to high barriers to take a bet on the win.
反正你哪看都看过了，我把你来瞧。哦，你管我的还没那他你要弄什么来？
If you hire people one person at a time, you'll look at this version of the don't do anything surprising because
你成功妹啊，么做你给讲我，你做你我冇得错的我可加油啊！
anyway,
你参加干这个没弄啊？
so you're taking
你吹eBay 的啊？
hiring groups rather than hiring one person at a time.
And what have you learned about how to hire, and what are the types of questions that you ask visitors?
Partly I'm too indulgent. I'm probably too seduced by people who are actually instead I should be seduced by people who are because I rather this job, it's a little bit of a scenic ride. I've been people stand advertising for a long time and they explain it simply by saying I'm nosy. I get to ask a lot of questions of a lot of different businesses and pry into other people's affairs to an extent where if I were working with one client company I'd probably run out of things to be curious about. So but I would always hire with just as David Owen did when he wrote his advertising copy would always claim show 3 other people before you then present it. And the argument is you can always misunderstand something. You can write something which is perfectly clear to you, but which is something else. In the same way, I would be uncomfortable ever hiring purely on an individual basis. I would then do it rejecting I think hiring has become too low risk. Is neither right nor valuable nor required. The example I would use is chess. Okay, if you're a good chess player, you're probably is it fair to say the opposite? That if you're a bad chess player, that means you're not intelligent. There are incredibly intelligent people who can't play chess for shit. Okay, I think university attainment is one of those chess indicators. It was originally designed to provide reliable bureaucrats for the civil service or reliable functionaries for the church at a very small scale. In other words, people who can be trusted not to cock up.
Yeah.
The extent to which it actually selects for creativity or possibly deselects for creativity is something well worth debating. One of the things you know about advertising industry, it is still not as much as it used to be, but it's still a bit meritocratic. In that rather like catering or hospitality, you can go from the post room to the boardroom.
Yes.
It's rarer, and it annoys me that it's rarer, but you understand the hospitality industry. It's entirely meritocratic. Once you start work, no one gives a damn what your prior qualifications were. Oh, that's actually true most graduate recruitment. So after you've been in a job for 3 years, your degree has a half life. It's critical in terms of your first job, but it becomes increasingly after friendly jobs actually have double first in maths from Cambridge. As at more point in your working life does your double first in maths basically become more or less irrelevant. After that point, you're well done. Your knowledge can cost you more because we've got a real measure of your attainment in the real world. So why would we rely on people after a profit? So you have this absurd thing with higher education, so things like an interview suit.
Yeah.
You're spending $9 grand a year taking a fancy suit, shiny shoes for your first job, suiting you for your first job. Once you've been in a job, no one's down for you. A few obviously
Yeah.
okay. But most jobs, it's merely the proxy measure. And it's very basic because we're rejecting a lot of talent. What I mentioned about advertising practically is a successful consists of a few chin-stroke artists, okay, and it'll consist of a few people who are showmen and a few people who work brilliantly in the hospitality industry, and then the creative department, they'll just be some of the hip-hop graduates and some of them maybe school droppers, but they're just people who have a spectacular talent or innate ability for thinking differently, which the education system doesn't really identify and may even discourage.
So what would your advice be to an 18 to 24-year-old thinking of getting into marketing? Right? So part of that question, has marketing changed as well?
Yes, it has changed. I think it's lost a lot. It's slightly hijacked by the deterministic thinkers in media consulting, management consulting, who are trying to reduce advertising to a kind of mathematicized algorithm. And by the way, there is part of advertising that does submit to that kind of very narrow direct response, bottom of the funnel, close to the point of sale advertising. You can to some extent optimize. But a large part of it, I think, needs to be heuristic. And we've got to fight back against the culture of accountability. Because the entire business world is hijacked by the finance function, basically, who have gained right to veto over everything. I mean, in government, we're in the treasury. I'm not against the treasury. I'm not about care and community scheme for high-functioning autistics. It has its role, okay? So the extent to which those people are allowed right to veto and can effectively, what you might call a nerdish obsession with protocol and procedure, can effectively override instinct, intuition, experimentation. That's what we have in economic growth, because the finance people who thrive on certainty are effectively holding the accountable.
Are you a fan of Duty Jobs in the future? Hi, I'm Sonny, one of the producers behind the show. Have you ever thought my business is up for the spotlight too? Well, you're not alone. Companies reach out to us all the time, asking us to create podcasts and digital video content for them. But until now, we've only taken on a limited amount of projects. But here's the good news. In 2025, we're expanding. Our production company, Boxlight, is now ready to help more businesses like yours tell their stories with high-quality, white-label content. Curious to see what you or how much it might cost? Head over to boxlight.io. You'll find examples of our work and even a podcast calculator to explore your options. That's boxlight.io. We'd love to help you shine in 2025. Now, back to Jimmy.
How did you go? In the UK, yeah, okay. One, useful, not perfect, but useful comparisons comparing the US and the UK. Well, the US is much more marketing friendly, it's much more opportunistic. As I said, marketing is seriously counted in the American business press. Salesmanship is seen as a great virtue. You have the advantage, I would say. Highly optimistic to the point of credulity population. Where the population believes that life is capable of almost continual improvement, and therefore has a greater appetite than the Brits do for new and innovative things. But we as Brits, fundamentally, I think the extent to which businesses are now laser focused on costs and therefore ignoring opportunity costs, which are harder to quantify, and therefore missing opportunities, is genuinely alarming. I mean, what's the opposite of a procurement function? Procurement function may be necessary, asking the question, what's overpriced? You need a corresponding Jungian shadow department, which is asking the question, what's undervalued? What can we charge more for? How can we add more value? And so, there are things I am interested in, not only AI, which is good, but the mandatory AI conversation. I'm also very optimistic. I think that for a country in our time zone which speaks English, which has a lot of fundamentally a very, very good track record in terms of inventing, not only a track record in terms of monetizing inventions. I'm fairly optimistic about video games. In fact, it's a much more important technology economically than it's been given credit for. If you think about it, okay, the fact that routinely in the morning and the afternoon, in the space of only 2 hours, I can have meetings with 5 people on 4 different continents, okay, at a cost of zero. By the way, when you think about it, okay, those meetings, nobody goes through it's not to meet face to face. You go, no, that's true, okay? But on the other hand, this face-to-face meeting would have taken 7 months to organise, would have cost £15,000 to actually travel costs and accommodation costs to actually make happen, and would be vetoed by the finance league later. Okay, so the extent to which people talk about serendipity, I want people back in the office for serendipity. Yeah, that's true, but to get in the office, you need the same 50 people, okay? The fact that you can talk to anybody in the world almost instantaneously, but what's more, they're also willing to talk to you. And you can tap expertise instantaneously at distance. And the fact that maybe you don't have to live in London to work in London, by the way. All those facts strike as hugely economically important. If they're handled well, they're economically valuable. If they're done badly, they could be economically damaging. But this, a very simple fact, okay, nearly everybody in the world will give you an hour of their time on Zoom for a roundabout $1,000. Okay, not Barack Obama, not David Beckham. But even a Nobel Prize winning economist would probably go, yeah, all right, money is cheap. Okay, I use not particularly valuable because they're quite real. But the fact that seems to be an enormously important fact in terms of the sharing of expertise. But also in terms of business-to-business activity, which is 50% of the economy. Generally, you had this absurdity before in B2B, where there were 2 modes of interaction between 2 businesses. There was either a very distant mode, which was, you set up a big stall at a German trade fair, you send people emails, okay, you communicate, you send them letters, you invite them on golfing days, okay, expensive or not very good stuff. And then you had the face-to-face meeting, which was kind of high stakes, difficult to organise, expensive to do. The important thing for me, for B2B activity, is that Zoom actually fills in the middle of the funnel. In other words, there wasn't really in B2B until Zoom came along. There was basically first date and there was marriage. Okay, and there was nothing in between. There was no engagement, literally and metaphorically. There was no kind of, actually, I think we might predict here, let's continue this conversation. And so, genuinely, I think in B2B, which is a large part of the economy, it never gets the same attention. I think that not only Zoom meetings, but webinars, like, the fact that actually small entities can be major video players, I think that's a highly important fact. And there's a guy, Nick Bloom at Stanford, who's studying this in detail. Julia Hobsbawm, very good at them, is also studying the new world of work. But the attention and the investment it's receiving in terms of studying how do you do this well, how do you do hybrid working well, how do you do it badly, what are the healthy findings in terms of increasing productivity or reduced productivity. We should be discussing these things for an hour a week, and nobody is.
That is really interesting. One situation though,
by the way, I sit at the Department of Transport, for the price of about 7 miles of motorway, you can give everybody in the UK premium service. Okay? Now, unfortunately they're called the Department of Transport, not the department for not moving people around very much. But it strikes me that the best thing the Department of Transport can do is to remove unnecessary journeys from the rails and the roads. But in Finland, you have Department of Transport and connectivity, which strikes me as a fundamentally intelligent thing to do, because you recognise the fact that electronic things are to some extent either complementary or substitute for physical movement. You can transmit things electronically, you can transmit things physically. And Therefore, maybe you need Wi-Fi on trains rather than faster trains, to reprise one of my Indian bachelors. Okay, but I think in the UK, that same joined up thing. I think we're going to have to solve it.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think that's quite a good idea on that side of things. Why do you think that outcome great from it? But I think it has sort of. And you see that perhaps in marketing as well. That's marketing.
Risk aversion is why you need. Yeah, the status quo bias is so strong. I used to think that marketing was most effective when you needed the consumer to make, you had one very important distinction, and you needed the consumer to make a small behavioural change. So in other words, I'll have poor things rather than great things. Move your hand to the head, advertising's pretty good. Okay. I used to think that if you had a really, really big idea, you didn't need marketing because it sold itself. Then I realised that when you have a really, really big idea, a big idea requires a lot of behavioural change. It creates a lot of psychological friction. And so, perfect true advice, okay? The best idea any single I think but the best idea any single person ever had is probably smallpox. It took them 50 years to get full acceptance. Okay, Vienna coming up with the idea. Massive psychological resistance, institutional resistance, religious opposition. Okay, really big ideas require a lot of marketing because they require a lot of people to change their minds. You can see where it works well. Same-sex marriage is kind of trial. Fairly rapid, consensual change. Handled absolutely brilliantly. On the other hand, say, drink driving norms, that's probably a 50-year.
Not just another AI tool, it's the world's first AI-powered sourcing agent built to actually understand your business needs and act like an insider. You know, somebody who already knows your niche, your target market, and what's trending across all of global e-commerce. So today I'm going to show you exactly why Axio matters heading into the 2026 year, how it's revolutionizing product sourcing, supplier research, and how it uses different ideas to
basically turning people
product
into
lines automatically. By the way, you guys can follow along with me in the video by going down to my description box and read my directions. Okay, in section number 1, we're going to discuss why sourcing needs revolution. So let's be honest, sourcing products the old-fashioned way is absolutely insane. Endless searches, copying and pasting supplier data, clicking paste for replies, vetting factories that look legit, that can totally disappear whenever you ask for certifications. Meanwhile, your competitors are launching products twice as fast because speed is what is going to win in 2026. E-commerce is moving at lightning speed, and manual sourcing just cannot keep up. And this is exactly why Axio exists, to give every brand, creator, and small business the same sourcing power they usually reserve for Fortune 500 companies. It's like having a 24/7 sourcing team, 10 professionals, researchers, product developers, supplier verifiers, and negotiators, all powered by AI. So in section 2, let's talk about what Axio actually does. Axio is an AI-powered sourcing agent that integrates vertical commerce data, supplier databases, and automation
massive
tools
resistance
into one
because they know that
powerful
they'll number
chat-based
the pink car in 4 years' time, and the
literally
resale
talk
problem is
to
theirs,
it
not
just
yours.
like you
Okay.
would chat with,
But there is something rather tragic about it. By the way,
project
the sort of I'm
manager,
not
and
interested
now
in cars
with agent
phenomenon is very
mode,
much
which
in
just
London,
launched
New
in
York,
August.
places where there's
Take one
huge public transport.
conversation like
But
how
I
to
also
launch
think
an
there's something really important, which is
eco-friendly kitchen
if you
line
don't drive
with
fairly
bamboo
frequently,
cutting boards,
driving is very
reusable
enjoyable.
wraps,
It's actually quite
compost
stressful.
bins,
I know that
and
because
break
whenever I
that
pick
down
up a
into a
hire car
full
from the
sourcing
airport, which is an unfamiliar
workflow.
car,
So
the
product
first few
research,
hours I find
supplier
very
matching,
lightly.
quality
I'm
vetting,
on it.
pricing
Okay.
comparison,
It's my
and
own
even
and I drive it every
outreach. So
day.
it's not just
It's actually
talking about
joyously
what to
enjoyable.
do, it is
Yeah.
literally
Now,
doing
if you're in
it for
London,
you. So
not
let me
only
go
is
ahead and
driving in
show you
London
guys
horrible,
what I
but
mean.
the people in London don't drive very frequently, so they also hate driving.
Number
And
one
so you
is
get this kind
product
of feedback
ideation and
effect
trend
where
discovery. You
central
can go
London
in and
basically
ask
creates
Axio here for
non-drivers.
bestseller.
Because I imagine if you haven't driven for 3 months and you take the train from Reading and you pick up a car from Avis, okay, the first hour of your driving, even if you were previously a reasonably experienced driver, is pure tentacles.
Yeah.
And so what's interesting is once you move out of London, you drive every day, if only to the station, okay, it becomes system one and it becomes a flow state.
Yeah.
And actually, one of the interesting things about research into happiness, when they look at people's sort of happiness and well-being minute by minute, is how much people enjoy driving. Which is something, by the way, which I don't think the driverless car movement has fully clocked, which is that we like a feeling of control.
Yeah.
So where is the driverless car movement centred? Well, it's in Silicon Valley, which has the worst traffic in the world.
Yeah.
Okay? You know, the driverless car movement in, let's say, if you live on the west coast of Scotland or on the A9, you know, where driving on empty roads is probably a sheer delight. Not quite the same benefit, is it?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, that is really interesting in terms of the future of the car and automobile.
I'm very pro-car, and I'm co-wrote a book with Pete Dyson, who is a simplest. But he's actually a very keen and very, very able triathlete. And it's interesting because I'm very pro-car, but I live outside London. He tends to be anti-car.
Yeah.
But we reached a very, very good accommodation, which is, look, what we need to do in behavioural terms is simply increase everybody's repertoire of different transport modes. So that, in other words, their use of transport is less habitual and consequently more intelligent. And I've got a very simple solution for that. I think you should put the annual car tax disc. Okay, here's an even better idea. You introduce road pricing, okay, but you get 50% of the money you spend on road pricing back in public transport vouchers.
Okay.
Okay, or you make the tax list £300 a year, but you get £400 of rail vouchers. Now you make an exception for people in West Wales and the north of Scotland where the public transport's kind of hopeless.
Yeah.
But what that's doing is saying, it's absolutely fine to use the roads, but it's not fine to use the roads to the exclusion of anything else.
Yeah.
You should at least be familiar enough with rail travel to see it as an alternative and part of your repertoire, rather than just defaulting to the law.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no right answer. If I'm getting to Manchester, do I drive or do I take the train? Well, it depends how much luggage I have, how many of us are going, what's the weather like, what time of day do I need to travel, how long am I staying for? Okay?
Yeah.
If I'm staying for one night, Uber basically replaces the need to have your car there. If you're staying for a week, you're going to drive.
Yeah.
Okay? There aren't right answers to any of these things. And so the dogmatic people who say you must shift from mode A to mode B, unfairly take account of people with buggies, people with young children, all kinds of reasons, bad weather, etc. But what you can reasonably say as a good aspiration for a transport policy is get more people to actually experience more modes.
Yeah.
I'd like to get back on the London buses, but I've never made the cognitive effort to actually master the whole thing.
Yeah.
I love driving by bus. The idiots who design buses only put the number and the final destination on the front of the bus. I don't know, most people aren't going to the final destination.
Yeah.
The fact that the thing ends in Clapton Ponds is of no interest to almost anybody on the bus, but that's what they display on the front of the bus. I wouldn't know if it goes via St Pancras, Charing Cross, Cannon Street, Victoria, Farringdon, Blackfriars or London Bridge. That bus could get me home. But that's not displayed on the bus, because you could get 2% extra GDP just by improving things like signposting and messaging.
If you could have one job in cabinet, would it be transport secretary?
A very good question. Only if I could do it for 5 years.
Right.
Because I don't think the problem with all these jobs is it takes you about a year to master the brief anyway, by which time you've been reshuffled into junior treasury secretary or whatever. But yes, I think you could do, if you made it a 5-year thing and you actually introduced things like citizens' assemblies and a really, really intelligent, deep discussion about where the investment goes. I mean, I did meet Steve Norris, and we had a wonderful discussion. He was transport secretary in the major administration. And but in fact, he came from industry, didn't he?
Yeah.
What you need actually is you need more people in politics. This is the terrible thing, okay, who are a bit spiffy. Because when talking to the people at the behavioural insights team, okay, they love working with wrong chaps.
Yeah.
Because having been a bit of a salesman, he instinctively understood this stuff. Whereas everybody else who's been trained in PPE, okay, is massively resistant. They basically see marketing as cheating, okay? Right? So you need a few more Steve Norrises and Grant chaps kicking around the place, okay? They're a bit wide.
Yeah.
So I would be unashamedly wide if I were to do that job. But I think you could, with actually, you could take public opinion with you.
Yeah.
Okay? If you're allowed enough publicity. I'd probably open up a massive YouTube channel and do the thing that way. Now, admittedly, that means some 20,000 comments of abuse, because I know that's the problem with politics and social media. But I think you could genuinely do something really, really interesting.
Yeah, but I think building a business or government via YouTube and social media will become a much bigger.
But housing would be the other one, because I think you can psychologically, part of the housing crisis is a psychological problem. NIMBYism. How do you get NIMBYism?
Yeah.
In other words, at the moment, there's a fundamental problem. If your next door neighbour wants to build a loft extension or a house in the garden, you know that they're making £200,000 from getting planning permission, whereas you're putting up with a load of inconvenience and getting zilch.
Yeah.
There's a very, very strong psychological thing, which is we have evolved to practice cooperation. But with that evolution to practice beneficial cooperation, we have a very strong instinct against what you might call a dog in the manger instinct, against any arrangement where one person gets all the gains and you get all the downside.
Yeah.
And so that would be a really, really interesting area of exploration.
Briefly talk about. We touched on social media there. It strikes me one of the big things that's changed in marketing, or the growth of, is sort of the personal brand and so on. I think it's something that you might not have set out to master, but
not only did I not set out to do it, it came completely by surprise, and I never thought, I don't exactly have the demographics or indeed the physique of a likely TikTok star, do I?
No, but how have you found that sort of extension of marketing and the rise of personal brand in the last 20 years? I mean, it's always been there.
I remember the influence campaigns always existed. I mean, I met someone whose grandfather worked for the Electricity Supply Board, which is the Irish body back in the 1920s and 30s, responsible for encouraging people to electrify their homes.
Yeah.
And his social media influence campaign was rather brilliant. Every month he gave the priest a bottle of whiskey on condition that in his sermons the priest would mention occasionally how much he enjoyed having electricity. So this isn't new, it's just amplified.
Yeah.
David Ogilvy, in his book Ogilvy on Advertising, refers to this story of a man who was doubled over in pain with indigestion, and a man in a Rolls Royce drives up and tells him that he needs Andrew's liver salts, and the person was the king's doctor, okay, which was a story that went round, and it was almost certainly a social media, instigating word of mouth campaign. So it's apparently not new. I'm also trying to instigate a new practice on podcasts, which is I think the guest should get to plug something as well as the host.
Definitely.
And what I'm trying to do is bring back the Pearl and Dean local cinema rounds, where the guest just plugs their favourite local restaurant or something. So if you want Venezuelan food in Sevenoaks, I recommend Budare, okay? Or indeed you should try Bussey's Bites, which is Westerham's best and indeed only Jamaican Italian cafe. But one of the things I'm trying to do is actually instigate that norm, because I think it'd be quite fun if podcast guests got to do a little bit of recommendation as well. Because they're the people who've done the travel. Okay. But no, it is fascinating. I mean, it's fascinating. It's also fascinating because I think something happened with everything from TikTok to YouTube, which we didn't fully notice. Jimmy Carr really put it when he said YouTube became the biggest TV channel in the world and nobody noticed. Similarly, what's happened with TikTok, YouTube, etc., is they've reached such an enormous scale of content that they're now searchable. And I don't think you spotted that happening. In the early days of my YouTube use, it was, let's see if there's anything worth watching.
Yeah.
Okay, it was a bit like going to TK Maxx. You don't go to TK Maxx with specific purchases in mind.
Yeah.
You go to have a shifty around to see if there's anything worth buying.
Yeah.
And then what happened is when you reach a certain scale, you become searchable. Now, what's fascinating is young people search TikTok all the time. I have to confess, it never occurred to me to do that. But the idea that actually TikTok and YouTube are now, so YouTube is effectively Wikipedia for video.
Yeah.
Okay, that wasn't the case 10 years ago. And I think that's a really interesting change in terms of how all this content gets consumed. And whether it passes by to an extent.
Well, I mean, I agree with that. I mean, I think social media advertising is pretty well formed, but I think there is an element of brands creating their own TV shows, their own long-form content, which is, you're seeing the early stages of that, but I just think that's going to become a bigger and bigger.
Yeah, I think whether you like it or not, if you're a marketer, you're a broadcaster.
Yeah.
And I don't know how, and that means that actually, one of the interesting things is that when you've got to attract attention rather than buy attention, as you would do in conventional advertising, you need essentially to loosen the normal rules. In other words, the rules for creating attention that generates its own audience are fundamentally different. And it also requires you, I think, to be much more oblique. It raises interesting questions about brand personality.
Yeah.
It raises very interesting questions about things like, in an ad, not always, there were very, very great advertisements which kind of use the pratfall effect, where they kind of admitted to failings or were happy to present brand as not perfect or something of that kind. But I mean, the level of honesty and candor, is different.
Yeah.
And so, that's always been the case. I mean, advertising has to adapt to the fact that context really, really matters.
Yeah.
And how you communicate in one context is violently different from how you communicate in others. I mean, I think there's a further observation, which is that the extraordinary success of podcasts reveals actually a market failure among broadcasters, in that broadcasters became, first of all, they probably undervalued conversation as a form of content too early. In other words, they're obsessed with drama or game shows or whatever it may be. Now, actually, if you think about it, conversation storytelling, other than maybe dance and sport, would be the oldest human art forms.
Yeah.
They're ingrained in us, effectively. And also, the fascinating fact, which the best thing a futurologist ever told me is there aren't trends, there are vectors. And what the futurologist meant by that is we tend to talk about a trend, which is X is going to Y. What is more common is actually that X is going to Y and the opposite of Y. And so what you see is a huge increase in very, very long form content.
Yeah.
The 3-hour podcast, the box set binge on Netflix, and also very, very short content. And one of the problems I think with conventional broadcasting is it become compartmentalised into these half-hour and 1-hour sets. There was some wonderful early experiments. The Norwegian state broadcaster, I think their second channels like Norwegian BBC Two, quite early on started experimenting with slow TV. I think it was 24 hours devoted to wood, which is very Norwegian. And a large part of it was just showing wood burning, and then it showed people chopping and storing wood. This created a massive scandal because apparently whether you store firewood bark up or bark down is one of those weird polarising Marmite things in Norway, which absolutely divides public opinion. But that was actually rather lovely. I mean, it was a broadcaster going, okay, we were experimenting with all these formats, but the actual time length where treatment is given. So I think, and then of course what happens is the skill set disappears. I've got my brother-in-law writes for example, various BBC TV detective programs. He said the number of people who write for 2 hours with no ads. Okay, in some ways in television writing, you get very, very optimised around a particular kind of length or format. And he said the whole plotting thing, the whole, all those devices become very, very different skills when you've got 2 ad-free hours to fill, rather than sort of a chunk of 35 minutes at a time.
Exactly, and a combination of some of the things we've talked about, the sort of like rise of the personal brand, the I think it's like
advertising terribly lost the skill of long copy. By the way. It's a skill that's atrophied, and it's still the long copy press ad or its digital equivalent.
Yeah.
Okay, is still, I would argue, for many products and many brand categories, the car category, if you want the electric car category especially, where people effectively need an argument, they need more information than is just provided in the headline. And the extent to which that skill has more or less disappeared is worrying, because sometimes it's the only thing that works.
Yeah. There's sort of the apex of some of this stuff we talk about, podcast, personal brand, etc. I think is like typified in sort of Donald Trump re-election, right? Like it's kind of like he himself is a personal brand. He got his message out last few weeks via podcast, which is then split off for social media as well, right? So you're getting that X and Y.
The story I love about the 2016 election, was it that? Yeah, I think, hold on. Was that I had a friend who was an academic, that every single person in academia thought that Hillary Clinton would win, except the primatologists. The primatologists who study apes, gorillas, chimpanzees, etc., they all knew Trump was going to win. And it does come down to weird, like, body language-y stuff.
Yeah.
It comes down to weird there is an interesting thing, okay, which is, well, a few interesting things. One of the things I found hysterical about the US election, where you realised how what you might call elite opinion has become completely out of touch, was when someone at a Madison Square Garden's Trump rally, there was a comedian who made a joke about Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
Okay. And it was universally believed among the Chantarati that, oh, he's completely lost the Latino, the Latinx, how do you pronounce that? It's Latinx. He's completely lost the Latinx vote. Okay. Have you actually met it, Latin Americans, ever? Because the idea, that's as absurd as saying if someone had told an anti-Trump, anti-French joke, it would offend the British because we identify as European. Okay. Latin Americans, okay, they're much more nationalistic than they have a sense of Latino solidarity. Cubans, for example, and Mexicans would have found that joke hysterically funny.
Yeah.
Okay. And it was just this idea of how these people are seeing the world through these bizarre and arbitrary kind of ethnic lenses.
Yeah.
Because if you actually, if you watch Narcos, okay, Mexicans and Colombians, it's partly, by the way, just culture roots. It's not that they necessarily hate each other, but it's a much, much more forthright culture in terms of banter, in any case. American English is more sensitive to banter than British English is. We're pretty familiar with what you might call friendly abuse.
Yeah.
Okay. And with Americans, particularly based on the Midwest, they can kind of miss the cues and think you're being massively rude. But I mean, a large part of that, I mean, people thought that Taylor Swift's endorsement would be actually decisive. And one has to admit that celebrity endorsement seems to be spectacularly ineffectual.
Always has
in politics. And actually, what was weird is the Democrats were paying for people to endorse. Okay, so, and again, hold on. How much sincerity do you have about your political beliefs? If you go, yeah, I'll support your campaign, but there'll be 10 million. I mean, that actually is actually a self-effacing endorsement. It's a self-cancelling endorsement.
Yeah.
But it was interesting because, in fairness, okay, I'm going to defend nearly all the pollsters got it wrong, but a colleague of mine in the United States within WPP had what we might call the marketing data on Trump versus Harris. And the marketing level data just showed that Trump's voltage, which is a technical term used by the brand asset valuator, okay, Trump's voltage was way, way higher. And then he said to me, he was in Canada about 5 days before the election, he said, no, Trump's going to win, forget all the other stuff.
Yeah.
So there were other modes of market research which were much, much closer. One of the cleverest ones was not asking people what they would vote, it was asking people who they thought their neighbours would vote for, which was an ingenious little lateral hack. Because when we're asked a question about ourselves, our question is, what does it say about me to answer this question? Not what's the honest answer to this question. Okay. Would you prefer this evening to have canapes with caviar or KFC? Okay. Your first thought is, I better not say KFC, because it makes me look a bit unsophisticated. But deep down, when you're walking past the bargain bucket repository, you're going to turn left. Okay. And so that was an ingenious kind of approach to research, which I thought was very, very clever indeed.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant way of just taking one component, one distorting component out of the information.
Yeah, that's really it's really interesting. And but it will be interesting to see whether that still works in 4 years' time. As of anything, there is now a bit of a herd mentality of like, okay, well that would be a golden, like sort of lateral actor.
By the way, for the Democrats, there's something there. Okay, I always describe the difference between ITV and Channel 4 and the BBC. Somehow, okay, when you watch Channel 4, if you watch Gogglebox, okay, or you watch ITV, you kind of get the impression that the people who make these programs kind of like their audience. They have a kind of affection.
Yeah.
Okay, the person who you really felt liked his audience was Shakespeare, all right? Because you have a whole panoply of different characters, some of them are fat and drunk and ridiculous, but you feel that Shakespeare actually loved humanity in all its kind of, right? And you have that slight feeling. The Democrats have lost that. You don't actually feel that they like the public. And little phrases like trash or, it was unspeakable, etc. Those kind of things, you actually get the feeling, and it's a feeling, it's not really about what people say, it's about the body language and the whole way in which things are presented. But, actually, to be honest with you, if you bumped into Donald Trump, he doesn't drink, but if you bumped into him in a pub, he probably would have a chat with you.
Yeah. It was definitely got that sort of, that factor, right? That's fascinating because which go for wine with this person, which politician most likely go for wine with. I think Nigel Farage scores pretty high on that, I guess. And very Ken Clark, that people would like to have a pint with him, And actually, someone once described Irish politics to me as Fine Gael are a bit more competent, but you'd rather have a pint with Fianna Fáil. That's basically Irish politics in a sentence. But it is something which is hard to it's hard to fake. One interesting thing, though, I once tried, I met Nigel Farage, and there is a fascinating attribute, which I think explains his popularity, which is that if you go to any kind of political gathering, most of the important people there are continually looking over there into his shoulder in case someone more important is walking into the room. And you go to one of those events, and Nigel Farage is having a chat with the bar staff. Yeah.
I mean, he's entirely indiscriminate with his attentions. Okay? And something about the public, I think, can fundamentally, their antennae can pick up on that.
Yeah.
Now, if you think about it, if you go back to chimpanzee, okay, there is a fundamental kind of instinct there, which is valuable. In other words, is this person, if I'm going to call this person kind of silverback gorilla status, it's not what I think about them, it's what I think they think about me. And that was one of the great things. A guy called Mark Rothschild managing director of Starbucks in the UK. He always said, I've attended loads of marketing meetings. And he said, most of them are total waste of time. So, but I picked up one great thing, which wasn't me, but somebody else said it, which is, it's not just about what people think about brands, it's what they think brands think about them.
Yeah.
You know that kind of feeling, which is overly pretentious. I always remember somebody saying that the strange thing with French hotels, okay, is that the cheaper they are, the better they are. That when you pay more for a French hotel, you just get a higher level of patronisation.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's a little bit of truth to that. You go to those very swanky places, and you feel that you as their customer are being slightly disdained, you know. The Democrats, if they just, I mean, to be honest, they're just terribly bad at finding candidates. I mean, you know, it always feels like a shoe-in or a coronation, okay? You know, in other words, Bernie gets basically, and there are people, I don't fully understand Americans, because there are people like Bernie and Elizabeth Warren, who I find unbelievably impressive. As a Brit, I find them really interesting. But for some reason, Americans tend to think they're mad.
Yeah. Final couple of questions. I'm going to let you plug something else as well, because I'm genuinely really interested in it, which is your Mad Masters course. And how you, as a personal brand, now, like, you could do a marketing. Well, you're not. Well, okay, you're gonna kick back.
I hope Howard is a behavioural science impresario and marketing evangelist. I do have my mission. My personal brand is a byproduct of my purpose. I was going to say, okay, which is that I want marketing considerations to come to the forefront in everything from policy making to new product development to business investment. I want the psychological component to be not dominant, but upfront. Okay, at the moment it's left to the end.
Exactly. One of my daughters came to me and said, I want to do marketing at university, fine, but I would far rather they did your kind of Mad Masters course. Talk to us why you do it, what it is, etc.
I think at a very simple level, I think that what we are cherishing in education and indeed in the business world is a kind of pseudoscience of fake determinism. Okay, pretending things that are quantifiable when they're not, pretending things that are formulaic and predictable when they're anything but.
Yeah.
Consequently, to counterbalance this bias in decision making, where actually we've evolved mental styles which are designed to win arguments, not solve problems. Well, the two are actually quite different. I mean, solving problems might be highly experimental. Winning an argument means you have to pretend to be right about everything.
Yeah.
Okay. Solving a problem might be, it could be one of these three things, let's go and find out some more. And the need to pretend, which is bolstered by the idea that the internet or AI provides us with perfect information, which is nonsense.
Yeah.
Okay. The need to pretend that we already have the information we need, therefore we must be able to come up with a decisive recommendation on the spot without further inquiry, is leading to very, very bad mental habits. Now, marketing, because of necessity, you have to be a probabilistic thinker and an imaginative thinker in marketing. You're not trying to be right, you're trying to be interestingly less wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. Because of that, it's a very, very good grounding in thinking differently. And the mental practices we need to adopt to solve the world's problems, or indeed commercial problems, or small personal problems, aren't the kind of mental habits that have been honed through our educational system, which is all about maths questions with a single right answer.
Yeah.
A multiple choice IQ test really bothers me. Why? Because once you become multiple choice, there has to be a single right answer.
Yeah.
A large component of human intelligence must reside in the ability to solve problems where there isn't a single right answer, and the correct answer is it depends, or one of these three. Okay, right? Now, multiple choice doesn't allow for that mode of thinking. And so the things I would also do is I'd read all the Sherlock Holmes short stories. I'd read a book called Obvious Adams by Robert Updegraff, which was published in 1916. It's only about 50 pages long, but it was one of the kind of epiphanies of my life, was reading that book. Partly because it was, hold on a second, what this means is that most people don't think this way by default.
Yeah.
And the way in which I probably thought by default was less normal than I thought, which also explains why people sometimes found me annoying. Okay. I also read detective fiction in general, because if you look at police detective work, it's a very, very good analogy for problem solving in all kinds of fields, from medical diagnosis to creative problem solving. And the reason for that is that cops, I think in some ways cops are more scientific than scientists are. Because scientists are only interested in the evidential, whereas cops, before they have the evidential phase of an investigation, where you need to prove the guy's guilty, cops have this prior phase, which you might call investigative. Now, what's the most cop question? Okay, somebody gets killed, some crime happens. You go door to door and you ask, did anybody notice anything unusual on the night of the 17th of November? Completely open-ended question, okay? You'll do the other stuff, you'll do the fingerprinting, you'll do the DNA, etc. But you also maintain this open mind, which is if anybody knows anything. Now, the fact that someone drove past 3 times in a white van,
Yeah.
okay, there's no evidence about it. You can't bang someone up for life for driving around in a funny way. But it's highly significant because it tells you where to direct your attention next.
Yeah.
Son of Sam was caught because he got a parking ticket, okay? Peter Sutcliffe was partly caught, in large part because 2 beat cops noticed that he parked the wrong way round. Now, the wrong way round apparently the Bradford Red Light District means in a red light district you normally park, how do you tip away? If you find yourself in the Bradford Red Light District and you want to blend in, okay? You park with your windscreen facing the wall because nobody can see what's happening on the back seat.
Right.
And Sutcliffe parked as if to make a quick getaway with his windscreen facing the road. And the cops just thought, that's a bit, you know, you notice that. 99.9% of the population would never have noticed that. I think it's an act of supreme creative observation. I don't know who those guys were. There was another guy called DC Andy snapped you, who spotted something early by, again, some very, very small details when doing house-to-house interviews. But cultivating that kind of cop mentality, where you're looking out for anything that might have no evidential value. It's not enough on which to base a decision, but it's something on which you can base further inquiry. And that strikes me as the mentality, actually, spending some time in the police might not be bad training.
That is a wonderful way to finish. Thank you very much for your pleasure. Welcome to the future.
Thank you ever so much.
Yes. No, I don't think that's actually likely to happen. I think that person's going to need more if I do that, right? Then why will you do it, right? And so oftentimes when you have those, when you use those two razors, one of the most common things that comes up, and it's now become an inside joke for me and some of my friends, is doing nothing at all is often the most productive thing to do in those situations. And so it has now taken on this inside joke of the heavyweight champion of the world, which is that there's all these different potential actions, and the heavyweight champion of the world is do nothing. And that one almost always wins. Because what should I probably do? Keep doing what I'm doing, keep on my business, focus on my marriage, focus on doing work, and ignore the rest. And what's interesting is that it is physically efficient, but emotionally painful. And so that is one of the, I would say one of the artifacts that I've collected this year. So number 10, more better. Now this isn't going to be a new concept for anyone who's listening to stuff, but I will have a slightly different take on this. New is incredibly risky. And so this is the best analogy that I've visualized this year that I'm probably going to take with me for the rest of my life, which is I want you to imagine, here we go, actually, do this. If I have these cannons, all right, and I throw them all over the place, if I keep doing this, how likely is it that all of them are going to end up in the exact position, separated by color, and stacked together? Very unlikely. I would have to hit refresh and keep doing that many, many times until eventually all of these are lined up, stacked up on each other super nicely in a way that's organized, right? This would take a lot. Like, could it happen? Of course, it could. It is statistically possible. Is it likely? No. And so when you think about this is 6 pieces of candy, right? There are variables within your business that create the business that works, right? And so when you have your business and it is stacked, it is working, it is generating revenue, the likelihood that you changing one of these variables makes the building or makes the stack or the business better goes down. And the taller the stack is, the more evolved your business is, the more bricks in that building have been properly placed. And so the higher the likelihood, the next move is the wrong move if it's something different. So I'll give you a marketing version of this. If you have something called a control, and you have a variable when you run a split test, 80 split test. If you have a control that you've run 36 split tests on, and it has won 36 of those, it is the number one control. The likelihood of you changing that, resulting in an improvement, is low. And so if you think about your business as it currently stands, there's many different ways to align these variables. Almost all of them are not profitable businesses. You happen to have one that actually works. And so if you have that, then the highest risk-adjusted move that you can make is if you do more of the thing that already works. I will keep doing more bricks in this order because that has worked before, right? You might try to do better, which is a tiny variation of what you're currently doing. But something truly new rarely works. And it also usually takes the most resources. And so for us, if we're going to do something new, I give myself one new thing a year. One. So what was the one new thing this year? It was the book. That was this year. Next year, you'll find out what it is, right? But I get one. And it's because I know what the tremendous drain of resources is. One big thing. One new thing. And so I would say that the bigger the companies that we have, the more resources we have, the fewer new things we're doing. Because when nothing works, you want to hit refresh as many times as you can. You want to do lots of new shit because nothing's working. But as soon as something works, then you start to have direction. You want to have less and less deviation from that, unless you really believe there's an extra risk that would require you to change everything, which is significantly less likely than it really is. In fact, I would say many business owners will destroy their businesses in reality for problems that they have manufactured artificially. Problems that have not even yet occurred because they're afraid of them happening. When in reality, when that problem happens, it's not going to happen overnight. And you're going to have some heads up, probably. And for those of you who are old enough to have businesses during COVID, so we've had businesses at least 5 years, right? Or 6 years, you know that you'll survive. You'll adapt, just like you always have. And so do not try and change the business to solve problems that do not exist. Because there's more than a problem that absolutely do exist today and you should solve it. And so going back to more, and this is something that's been, I feel like I've got another layer of paint on the more better new, is that oftentimes the highest return question is, why can't I do more of the thing that's working? Now, there's usually a much deeper, harder problem that you have to solve once you do the easy ones. But there's always a way to do more than you currently are. And it's just that once you realize that the level of difficulty of what it takes to do the next more is harder than doing something better or new. So instead of you bucking up and saying, I'm going to focus on this very hard problem, you then distract yourself with reasonable problems that no one will blame you for solving. Because the biggest risk to the business is not like a stupid decision, because those are unlikely to actually occur. The real risk to your business is the second, third, and fourth most profitable things that you could do rather than the most valuable thing you can do. This is a very important lesson for me this year. And so when you get clear on what the harder question is that you need to ask, of why can't I do more, and now it's getting hard for me to do it, then we have to remove every distraction that you have that makes you think about anything besides solving that problem. That's it. And sometimes the answer to that hard problem isn't a 1 week, a 4 week, or a 4 month solution. Sometimes you realize that your culture is fucked, and you have to fix the culture, and that's going to take you 18 months. And when you're 6 months into it, things will feel worse than they did when you started, but it doesn't make it any less of the correct decision for the business. It just means that your reinforcing event, or the reward for the work that you're going to have, is far in the future, and it doesn't mean it hasn't started working yet. because you knew when you started and you realized that this was the truth of turning the business, that this was going to be a long game what to do. And so you do not want to then try and come up with a new solution when the first solution never had time to bear fruit. Because sometimes the most productive thing you can do in business is give time. Let the solution actually work. This has been a very hard lesson for me many times as an entrepreneur, and I just want to pass it to you. Many of you guys have many half-built bridges. You had a way to get across, but you knew it would take 4 months, but 1 month in, you were still suffering, you thought, well, maybe I'll do this. It's like you never let the first bridge get finished. And so in a real way for me, I realized that I needed to build a brand. I'll give you 2 examples of this. So one, early days of Gym Launch, Layla and I realized that we had an entire tier of directors that were not competent enough. And so in the next 12 months, we had to turn 11 out of 11 directors. Very easy. And we turned directors, we also have to do it. Sometimes you turn teams underneath because they had a low bar, and so they brought in a lot of low bar people. There's obviously some good people they brought in too, but like very, very big process. Trying to kill morale for that whole year. But we knew that we weren't going to be able to grow the business because the level of skill of that team was not sufficient. And our bar was too low. And unfortunately, we can't fire ourselves. And so we had to do the next round. That was very painful. 6 months into that, culture is worse, and we had to turn the whole leadership team. Was it the wrong course of action? No. Should we change course? No. But it means that you have to learn to suffer. Because sometimes the correct course is the most painful. Because the highest leverage move often is the hardest problem that you're not choosing to allocate attention towards solving. In a more recent one, I was at 30 to 40 million a year for 3 years for Gym Launch. And the big aha that I had was that I needed to build a brand. And that took years. And so when I went into it, I was like, I will have to be doing this for many years before I'm going to carry any fruit from this. And my income, when I made that call, went down for the first 2 years by a lot. And so I think you have to be willing to stomach that period of time where you never be able to do the real solutions that are really going to move the needle. Because most business owners do the second, third, fourth thing, the incremental improvements, rather than the order of magnitude change that typically take order of magnitude in terms of time and effort. So, number 11, it's okay to just make money. So here we go. There's something that I like to call the third marshmallow fallacy. And so it goes like this. So many of you guys probably heard about the research study of like, okay, they videotaped kids and they said, we'll put 1 marshmallow in front of you, and then if you wait, 10 minutes, we'll give you a second marshmallow. Kids that wait, 10 minutes, they're more successful in life because it's proxy for your ability to delay gratification. Okay. What's interesting about that is that people then assume that delaying gratification is always the best course of action. And this is why this is a very interesting lesson. If you delay gratification indefinitely, then you will work your entire life for nothing because you have delayed gratification and then you will die. Said differently, if you were the ant that always saves up your money for the winter, and you keep saving, and then you die, you have a big stack of crumbs that you will never have done anything with. And so the question is no longer, like, once you have learned to delay gratification, so this will be me talking a little bit more to the winners in the room. Once you have learned to delay gratification, you then have to learn the even harder task of the appropriate time to accept gratification. Real. So this is incredibly difficult, especially for winners, because in the earlier part of your career, you get reinforced, you get rewarded for delaying gratification. And oftentimes there is a dose relationship. As in, the longer you delay, the bigger the outcome. So you just continue to learn to delay more and more and more. But there is a time where it comes to reap, because you cannot steal forever. And so I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who was like, hey, I don't do this thing because it's not going to add enterprise value. But the amount of money that we were talking about for this particular deal was like hundreds of millions of dollars. And I wasn't even that confident that the other thing was going to happen, and it would be like 10 years in the future from now. And so we need to allow some risk adjustment for outcomes to make the right decision. If you can get paid today versus getting paid in 5 years, there is a value to that money. Because you got 5 more years of being able to use those resources to, right? It allowed me to delay gratification on the rest of the business. But somebody who'd be curious of like, well, you should eat even more shit. You should suffer even more during that period of time. Was that you shouldn't have taken that distraction. You should have just worked even more in the business. But I don't think that's true. And so I say this only to the winners. If you're somebody who's never learned to delay gratification, never learned to save up for the winner, you still overspend your income. Ignore this entirely. But for those of you who are the savers, who do always live underneath of your means, who are willing to delay things 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, you have to then also be able to make the decision: when do I ask? When do I reap? And I'll give you one more example, and then I'll move to the next point. Which is, this is super common in content creators. And I think this is why I ended up writing this. I've seen a number of creators. I remember I had a conversation with a guy who said, hey, I have this Twitter following that I've built over the last however years. I said, okay. And he said, I would like to better monetize my following. And I said, all right, well, how many times do you like what CTAs do you have? What do you tell them to do? He's like, oh, nothing. I never want to sacrifice the goodwill I have with my audience. And I was like, okay, why did you build this brand to begin with? He said, well, I wanted to make money. And I said, okay, how do you expect to make money if you never asked for it? Because he had been taught, I have to delay. And to be fair, of course you have to delay. But at some point, you have to make the decision, now is the time. And to be clear, it doesn't mean that like now we have to ask every single day. It just means we have to begin the process of reaping. And so for you forever sowers, and I put myself in that bucket of always wanting to underspend and always delay the future, there is a line that you need to be able to draw for yourself for today's the day. I will begin reaping now. And I think that it is an entirely personal question, because it's also fundamentally answering the question, how much do I invest versus how much do I consume? I think the answer to that question is entirely individual. But I think most of us can agree that invest forever, consume nothing is probably not the way, and consume everything, invest nothing is also probably not the way. And so it's somewhere in the middle where you will have to pick what's right for you, but it is in the middle somewhere, which means you will have to consume at some point, you will have to reap, and you need to know that it is okay. You might also die. And so, there's that. Lesson 12, this is a small tactical one. This is a great reminder for me from business, which is the book launch. Clear beats clever in all things, right? You will need to repeat yourself until you die. No one cares. No one is listening. And so I had so many people were like asking, like, what was the secret behind the launch? It's like, I need 5,000 ads that pretty much said the secret. Like, that was it. And still most people didn't attend the launch. Right, of the book. And we still broke the records and did all the sales and donated all the book, we did all that stuff. And still, the vast majority of people that had minds, one, didn't find out about it, and two, even if they did find out about it, didn't even register. And the few that registered, still most of them didn't know. So, like, you have to think about this in terms of percentages. If I have 100 people who register for something, less than half will show up. if I have 1,000 people who find out something on an ad, less than 2% of them will even click. Right? So you're dealing with such small percentages that the idea that you want to be clever in any way is ridiculous. And I would say that the longer I've been in business, the more I emphasize clarity over cleverness. I emphasize simplicity over complexity. How do I make this as simple and as clear as humanly possible? And I think that is that effort of continuing to compress what you're saying and get it simpler and simpler, and that is where it becomes elegant, and that is where it becomes effective. There's a lesson that I was reminded of. I had a friend of mine. We were jamming back and forth. He had a master campaign for his company. He spent a day out here with me, and we were going through everything. And his team had this really complex marketing structure. He's a phenomenal marketer, and he's like, Alex, what do you think? And I was like, I think instead of having 10 things you're selling, I think you should have one thing and give 10 reasons for it. And he was like, yeah, I agree. And so he simplified everything down to one big benefit and 10 reasons for that thing, and had the highest converting campaign he'd ever done in the history of his company, and he has a very successful company.
Check the Xyz monster you want to summon to see how many monsters you need, what level they need to be, and any other requirements. You can't use tokens. During your main phase, if you have the required monsters, declare which Xyz monster you're going to summon. Then, stack the required monsters on top of each other in a main monster zone. Or, if you aren't using an extra monster zone yet, you can stack them there instead. Finally, special summon the chosen Xyz monster face up in attack position or defense position on top of the stack of monsters. This is called an Xyz summon. The monsters used to Xyz summon stay attached to the Xyz monster as Xyz materials while it's on the field, and go to the graveyard when the Xyz monster leaves the field. Some Xyz monsters also have special methods of Xyz summoning that you can use instead of using the required number of monsters with the same level.
Go Chaos Xyz Evolution!
If you have a monster like that, carefully read and follow the instructions on that card.
I give you Utopia Ray!
There are also spell cards that let you Xyz summon.
I activate Rank Up Magic Limited Variance Force! Time to overlay number 39 Utopia!
Many Xyz monsters have effects that tell you to detach an Xyz material from them. To do that, just take any one of the cards stacked beneath the Xyz monster and send it to the graveyard.
Attack with Shockstream Blast!
Xyz monsters don't have levels like regular monsters. Their stars represent a stat called rank. Ranks and levels are not the same. Cards that affect monsters of a certain level won't affect an Xyz monster with the same number of stars.
Company is very big and said it for a very long time. And after the day, he came up to me and was like, he's like, listen, I wanted to bring, he's like, my team's heard me say this so many times, they needed somebody from the outside to say. He's like, and I didn't, he's like, you got to be the bearer of bad news. And so like, just as a little moniker that you can remember for yourself in terms of writing copy, in terms of making sales pitch, in terms of writing emails, making content, whatever it is, one big idea with 10 reasons, rather than 10 big idea with one reason each. I'll leave it at that. Which this segues naturally into lesson 13, which is this year, the offer is still king, just like it was last year, just like it was the year before that. The offer still matters more than everything. And so we have begun the process of donating a lot of books from the launch, and we basically made the offer pretty simple. One of the variations of the test, there's a bunch of variations, but one of the variations was like, hey, just pay for shipping of $3, and you get all $3, and just pay for shipping of them. And so right now, I actually lose money, like literally lose money on that, even with the books being prepaid, and still. And what's crazy though is that the metrics that I've seen from that offer, that funnel, are better than any that I've ever seen in my entire career in marketing. And the reason I find that to be so interesting is that like we whip that together so quickly, and it's working because it's the offer, stupid. Like, how do you make an offer so good people feel stupid saying no? It's in the fucking sub headline, right? And so I'll give you a couple more tidbits that I've kind of like gathered together for myself. The reason we're able to break the record is because the bundle for donating 200 books were so strong and so compelling. We guys got 2 years building. The next thing is that whenever you have components of an offer or bonuses that you're going to include in any kind of offer, any service, anything, right? Each bonus should be worth more than the entire value of the thing you sell. I believe that most buyers are single issue buyers, like single issue voters. One like, that one key, that one unlock, that one reason why, to say that was worth it. And so if you ever try and put an offer together where you think, oh, the aggregate of these things is worth more, you have already lost. And if the bonus itself is complex enough that you have to explain it, delete it. Because the most expensive part about you explaining different components of the offer is the mental real estate it takes up to actually explain it. And so if something is worth saying, make sure that it's worth saying. And when you also build offers in this way, it forces you to think even more about how can I make this more compelling, how can I make it simpler, how can I make it more compelling, and each one of them has to carry their weight. And by doing that, you'll create a more operationally efficient business, number one. And your offer, I like to use this as my kind of my like razor for making a good offer, is that the offer should be textable. Can I text to someone? And then say, yeah, I'm in. And that's just a great way. Like you've got this much screen and that many words to say the essence of the entire offer. And if you can't fit it there, it needs to be better or it's too long. And so that has just been really valuable for me. And I've had that reinforced this year several times. Obviously, we did the offer at the launch. We're donating the books on the back end. But even within the portfolio companies, I mean, the reason I think that the offers book will always outsell the other books in general, I think my mom's not selling out this new, but like I think long term offers will outsell, is because like if you nail the offer in a lot of ways, nothing else matters. It's just getting it right is so hard. But there's nothing that you can do that can make your business have a bigger step change in your business's revenue and profit than really making the offer better. And it's like, again, I think on some level people have an understanding of like what things cost, and the reason I think that book online works so well is because they know it costs me. They know I'm losing money. Like they know that 3 hardbacks cost more than $15. Like they know that. And so shit, right? Like even one $15 is crazy. 3 is absurd, right? And so they know that. And so it's like people assume that, like I think Ogilvy said this. He said people think they're, the prospect is an idiot, but she's your wife. And it's like we talk to these amorphous masses, but it's like they're real people who are intelligent, who can make decisions, and they know when something smells off, and they know when something's a good deal. And so like you can only do so much dressing up with the copy and the words and the persuasive elements, because at the end of the day, you should be able to make the pitch by just stating the offer and shutting the fuck up and pointing to how to pay, and people should buy. The rest of it is dressing, right? It's just tweaks, it's just improvements. But the biggest improvement overall is gonna be what the thing you sell is. So sometimes it's gonna be reminded more than we be taught, and this year was a wonderful reminder for me of like, it's the offer stupid. Like, make it better. And that's a reminder for me for how to make ads work. So this is a little more tactical artifact. Right now, it's about volume of different creative. We did, 1,000 or 2,000 ads, I think, before we even started. I think it was 3,000 by the time the launch happened. I can't remember. It was in the thousands. And the way that advertising is moving in general, it's going to be about hyper-personalization. So with AI, you can create way more permutations much faster. And so I think we're going to have personalization at scale, and that's 2026. Right now it's M25, but like, I'm just calling this right now. I've already seen crazy returns that we're seeing in the portfolio with this across all the companies. Like, this is the future. Like, you need to be able to create lots of creative, and what's more important is you need to be able to create a machine that consistently proliferates the creative. So it's like, how do I get the customers to make creative that gets us more customers that make more creative? That's the process you want to install in the business. Or I think, I have to just keep on the team. I mean, there's problems with that for sure. But this is like, there's a great lesson for me this year, and what I'm taking into next year is like, you have to build a self-looking ice cream cone, and hyper personalization is going to be, I mean, I'm saying 2026, but I don't think it's going to go back. So I think that's going to be the future. So lesson 15, side quests can make the main quest. So what do I mean by that? So if you were very like, I hate to use this, like visionary founder, if you're somebody who like has lots of ideas, big dreams, you're always like giving shiny objects, a little ADD, a little touch of the ad, right? Sometimes you have to find things for yourself to keep distracted, to not break your main business. And because sometimes, especially the bigger your business gets, when you're smaller, literally it grows device. But if you're bigger, it just takes like, it might take a year for a big initiative to happen, because it's turning the Titanic versus turning a rowboat, right? And so I have found it useful for me. Like the books for me are obviously I find a way to make them additive to my overall business acquisition.com, but they take time from me. But that time I think gives me thinking space. It also allows my team to just continue to get better without me like blowing things up. And so I tend to prefer large change from a commercial level, from a logical level, for incremental, etc. But it's like how can I scratch the itch? Well, I have to do things that don't drain this key, that cannot drain resources from the main thing. The side quest only helps if it allows the main quest to succeed even more, not if it distracts from the main quest or pulls any resources from it. And so for me, writing books is that thing. For you, it might be something else. But I think I've grown more and more okay with the idea that like some things will take time within the business, and me having something to do in the meantime can actually increase the likelihood that those things succeed. And in some ways, it's a way of passing the time while things are painful. So the next one, which was a great lesson for this year, was delegation is the price of scaling, loss of control, right? And so I believe that the spiritual path of entrepreneurship is a consistent relinquishing of control. And so we were employees at some time, likely for many people, and then you stop doing that, and then you decide to start a business, and you typically do that because you want to have freedom. And so then you say, I want control. But in order to have true freedom, you actually can have no control. You have to accept. That's true freedom, right? And so at every level, in the very beginning, you do everything, and you say, I'm gonna have somebody help me with this, so you get a little control. And then the next level is like, okay, well, the doing I delegated, but the management, no one can manage like I can. And then you give the management, right? You're like, okay, well, no one can direct or lead like I can. And eventually get the leadership, right? It's like, well, no one can think of the vision of the future like I can. And then eventually, maybe there's somebody, Steve Jobs was able to do a thing, but many of us are Steve Jobs and hard work. And so delegation is the price of scaling, losing that control. And so hardworking people, and this is what's really interesting about this, hardworking people have a hard time coming up with non-hardworking solutions. And so this has been particularly difficult for me because like I will look at problems and say, oh, I wonder if I can outwork this problem. When Bill Gates talked about this saying, it's really good to have lazy executives because they will try and think of non-high energy ways to solve problems. And so the hard worker won't feel like delegating because they want to feel useful. And it's incredibly difficult, but if you draw the line, you have to say that you will not do anything in order for it to scale. Because otherwise you will actually be the limiter of your own growth. And I don't think we are as special as we think we are. And so you might kind of just have to give up some profit in the short term, but you'll make more in the long term. And so this has been kind of like a thinking process for me, which is at this point the razor I have is if it requires me, it doesn't work. That's how I think about it now. And so I use the term internally for my head when I talk about this, scale zero. Like, we have to scale me down to zero so we can scale it up to infinity. Otherwise, I will always be limited. And so this is kind of just like a great reminder or artifact that I've gotten from the year of scale zero. And I've been reminded this at this level now, is that nothing can rely on me because the business is just too big. The other little tidbit I'll add in there as well is if you're at equilibrium within your business, that means that like your supply and your demand are fixed. Like I can't take in more customers because my supplies like my team can't handle it, but I also don't have more demand, right? So it's like what do you do when you're in equilibrium? When I was in my earlier part of my career, I would say increase demand and then force the team to pull from the cracks, and then with the extra cash flow to be able to afford the next thing to hire. That was what I would have said probably the first 10 years of my career, 12 years of my career, and I would say that I have flipped that thinking probably this year, which is that I would say increase supply, and I'll explain why. When you're in equilibrium, whatever your next step is, you're going to have to bear a cost, and the cost will either be your reputation or your profit. And so if I increase demand, the cost of that increase will be my reputation because my team will probably not be able to deliver at the same quality that otherwise we have because they're overextended. If I increase supply first, then the bandwidth of my team will improve, and in the short term, they will have to train the person up, which will be a cost in the business. So I mean, I always have a double cost. I train the person up, and I have to bear the cost of the person as well. But once that's done, I will have dramatically increased the capacity of the business, which will then give bandwidth back, which will then allow us to push to fill up the demand side. And so the reason that we were even able to do the book launch this year, we actually originally were going to do it in February, couldn't do it because we didn't have bandwidth, and then we're able to do it in August because 90 days prior, we hired 4 directors and leaders as a business, which expanded capacity of the business so that we could launch. So that was just some of the lessons of this year from that. So next one was just real estate in general. So Sharon and I have done a lot of real estate deals together over the last 5 years. I would say we will buy a few $100 million in real estate this year. I'll get the exact number probably in a future video because we have a couple of days pending as the year ends. But what was very interesting is that I have a much better understanding of the tax laws around it. So this was a big W for us. I haven't talked about real estate in general because I haven't done a lot of deals over the last 5 years with Sharon because I didn't feel like I had credibility. And so I will probably, and Sharon will probably as well, next year we'll probably talk more about ACQ RE, so ACQ real estate, because we have got a significant amount of resources there that I think you guys will probably like that, and I certainly have enjoyed it because it was something that I felt was a deficiency in my skill set in terms of investing that I wanted to rectify, and so I talked about it many years ago. I talked about some videos of like very tiny deals that I did with some levels that you guys can work out as well, but I don't know what I'm doing, and so that is when I basically lifted up, and I got people who were more experienced, and I did what I was doing, and I was it is incredibly enlightening, and I very much understand the appeal of it now. So it was a huge deal, huge W for us this year, and I think will be a compounding vehicle for us in the future. And this is a lesson video for the year for me, and I'm grateful that we took all the steps that we did this year to do it. Next one, best ROI in business. All right, pay attention to this one. Best ROI is still talent. So the cost and return on talent. So let me get deep on this. You have how much did it cost you to get the talent, and how much will that talent make you? And so I had a dentist who came and was like, hey, I just went to the dentist, and they're fine, blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay, well, how much does the dentist make you in gross profit per year? And at his facility, he made $700,000 in gross profit per year per special dentist. So I was like, okay, that's gross profit. I said, okay, fine. And I said, so if you just had, and I think he was doing $4 or $5 million a year in profit, something like that. And I said, okay, so what's the problem? He said, well, I can't find any of these dentists. And I said, okay, well, how much money are you spending, on recruiting and marketing? And he was like, I don't know, like $2,500. I was like, okay, so let's hear me out. I said, if I had an investment that I said would cash flow $700,000 a year, what would you be willing to pay one time to buy into that investment? He was like, I mean, if I do $700 a year, it's $700. And I was like, right. So you should be more than happy to spend 50, right, on a headhunter, or 150 on a headhunter to go get this level of talent. And he needed 4 to hit his next goal, which he had, which was like to double the business for me. And so I said, all right, let me ask you this. I think he had $4.6 million business profit. I said, this year, if instead of making $4.6 million profit, you make $4 million, and then you took the 600 to get 4 guys at 150 each for a headhunter to go get that talent, and then you have relocation bonuses, whatever. Would that be worth it? He was like, when we say it like that, I'm like, right. And so I still to this day believe that, especially in the age of AI, where every star employee who can use technology gets even more leverage, the return on talent is even better than it's ever been. And so when you see Meta paying these $100 million bonuses and stuff for these single individuals, you're like, they're crazy. Or they know something we don't know, which is that they might still get $1 billion or $2 billion or $5 billion in value from this one person if they can unlock it. And so I think about this from 2 angles, like a micro and a macro perspective. So on a micro level, when you bring someone in, you get time back. It's work that you don't have to do, that you don't get back. Phenomenal. On the macro level, the higher the level of talent, the more it's impossible for you to have their lifetime experience. I can't live in AI coders' last 20 years, right, or last 10 years. I can't go do that. So all I can do is spend money to go buy that lifetime experience and then apply it into my business. And so fundamentally, the bigger the business gets, the more it's about assembling the talent that then builds the business than it is about building the business. And your rate of business growth will be limited by your ability to learn, because no one will come work for you who's better than you. And look at my caveat on this. No one will work for you who's better than you at everything. For sure. Many people work for me who are better than me at their specific functions. But they know that I have depth in some things, that my depth is as good or better than their depth in their specific thing. And so excellence attracts excellence. And so if you want more A players, you need to become an even deeper A player. Because at the most simple level, if you had the 5 best teammates in the entire world, you would have one of the most valuable businesses in the entire world. That would be reality. Elon's superstar skill is that he's so good at engineering that he can attract the best engineers. And as a result, he can build the best engineering-based companies. That's his secret. And so he's not actually running 6 different companies. I mean, he obviously makes his key decisions in there, but a huge amount of decisions, arguably the vast majority of decisions, physically couldn't be made by one man because of the size of all 6 people. And so the only way that's accomplished is by having such a strong brand, by being so good at what you do, and the best in the world will work for you. The problem is that you're not the best in the world until they don't want to work for you, which means, as always, we are the problem, we are the leader in the business. Next set of lessons for me from this year. So A players will make you rich, but here's the downside, the hard part of A player culture. A players cost more per head count, but not in actuality. So let me give you an example. If you have 5 8s and 5 6s on a team, what really happens is that the 6s pull down the 8s, and now you have a bunch of 6 7s. The smart move is to fire all 5 sixes, and what happens is your 8s become 9s, and you never needed the 6s to do that. And that is something that I've seen over and over and over again. I had a team of 14 sales guys at one point, and we had a case where there's one guy was stealing, the other guy knew about it, and and so we ended up cutting, I think, from 14 to 6. And those 6 guys closed more deals than 14. Real. I've also had to do this on the media team. I mean, I've had to do this in a lot of different teams over the years, where I have to just massively take an action because culture runs amok, and this bad leader, they lower their standards, and then you got 8s and 6s, and then the 8s start acting like 6s too. But then when you get all the bad ones out, then all of a sudden these 8s rise to the occasion, and they're like, we just only want to play with 8 players. Because 8 players will self-manage, but everyone has to be an 8 player. Otherwise, they'll say, oh, that's accepted, and either they'll lower the bar or they'll leave. And one of the difficulties of this is that your definition of an 8 player will change as you get better. What I thought was an 8 player when I was in, when I owned a gym was somebody who was making $50,000 a year, and I was like, this is the shit. This guy is the man. This is a player. And then I had my first $75,000 year, my first $100,000, and then first 200, and my first 400, and my first million, and my first multi-million. And at each level, I'm like, I didn't really make people like this, right? And so your definition of what good looks like will always be better, and this is a quote from Troy, the best talent is always in the field. And so we always want to make room. We want to build a business that has a vision that's big enough that their big dreams can also fit inside. And I'll just say on a tactical level, this is now just almost become my racer. I have yet to find a player that I don't immediately know is an 8 player within the first 14 days. It just hasn't happened. And so I think what's really happening for me now is that like my tolerance for not 8 players is just gone. I can just say like I'm sure they're okay, and I'm sure we give them time, and I'm sure they can become a 7 in so much. They're not going to be an 8. Why bother? And that is a hard culture to enforce because people don't want to let other people go. They hate this person to change their jobs, etc. And some people might say, oh, you're not giving them a chance. I want to be clear. It depends on the level of who you're hiring. If you're hiring very low wage employees, the training is really fast. That can be different than maybe somebody who has to ramp up. There are elements of this, but you can still see leading indicators in terms of character and work ethic almost immediately. And those are the reasons that most people will get fired, not because of kind of the day-to-day skill set. Which leads us to the next one, which is money attracts talent. Culture keeps talent. And so, hear me out. You need to be able to pay enough that 8 players will ride the ride, right? You must be this tall to ride this ride. But whether they'll want you to keep riding the ride will depend on how good the ride is, right? And so, financial incentives are absolutely important for attracting them, but in my opinion, not very important not for getting the most out of them. The non-financial incentives will become significantly stronger than the financial ones because the financial ones are too infrequent. So if you think about how behavior works, behavior is reinforced in the moment. Latency beats intensity every day and twice on Sunday. The reason that one drug is more addictive than another is purely based on how quickly you feel good after you take it. That is how addiction works. Why are inhalants so addictive? Because it's immediately in your bloodstream. Why is Facebook and social media thing so addictive? Because the red light happens immediately. It's not because a red light is inherently this crazy thing. As you can say, agree, nicotine is not a super strong drug. It's immediate. That's why it's so addictive. And so if we think about addiction as a way of changing behavior, then we think, how can I get someone addicted to the right behaviors in my business? And the way that addiction would happen is you have to have reinforcers within the way the business works that happen in real time. And are any of those financial? And so we have to do this high ride this ride. You have to pay well enough that 8 level people are there, but you still might not get true A level performance unless you have an A culture. And so when you have a team of A's, they will self-manage and they will continue to reinforce each other for being A's. And if you've ever been on a winning team, it's more fun than being paid well and on a losing team. If you have to ask somebody when they're in the Super Bowl, how much do you have to pay to try hard to win this game? No one, they would do it for free. Because winners want to win more than they want to make money. That's what makes them winners. Money is what will get them in the door, but winning is what keeps them there. So next little tactical lesson, decentralization wins. So we are big advocates of decentralization. I say I'm taking this as a Warren Buffett, a feather out his hat. I believe that people need to stay focused, shared resources, split resources. And so our goal, especially in terms of how we run the company, is that as fast as possible, we want allow functions to be self-sustaining and ideally from day one, right? And if not, we need to look at that investment from Gold Cloud. Something has to get paid back as fast as possible so they can become independent.
在这里准备出发。
This is like kind of like revenue line. So I do not like centralization. I want independent leaders to own their own P&Ls so that they can stay completely focused on making that thing win. And the times in my career where I have gotten distracted, was actually I distracted my own team from winning because I took resources from here and said, oh, we're going to also pursue this opportunity, but I didn't increase infrastructure. And so I think this is honestly like this is one of the big reasons why I finally feel like I figured out how do we go from a few $100 million to $1 billion a year in sales. This is for the more advanced business owners. This is the big unlock. Is that you have to think of business of businesses. You have to think of team of teams. Right? And so it's not like, oh, Amazon is this one business. Amazon has many revenue lines, and they function as basically just many businesses under the brand of Amazon. They have the same culture, they have the same ideals, they strive for the same ultimate outcome, and they're aligned in that way. But the actual doing this of AWS versus the logistics business versus the private label business of Amazon, all of those are very different. And so each of them has CEOs in their own right. And so acquisition.com now, we have two revenue lines outside, or 3 revenue lines outside of the portfolio. And well, each of them, to that point, each of them has their own presidents and leadership team. And so that's the big mistake that I kept trying to make. I kept thinking I'd make this business bigger, when in reality, like, humans can only manage so many humans, right? And so things eventually split off and become their own units of business, and it's very difficult for a CFO of a holding company to know how much frontline customer service person needs to spend at this particular company. They're too far away, and so that's why I don't like centralization if you're building a very large business. And I say that with the exception of software, because basically the operations of that scale. But the way that revenue lines are managed in the software world is basically feature sets, and so you have the CEO of this feature, CEO of this feature. So still more or less what you say. When you make the revenue is consolidated with one membership. But if you have a service business,
就是买薯片。
you'll have different lines of services and different pricing associated with that. But the leaders and what they're selling. And so that is a huge unlock for me. Finally, doing the sales.
我冇，因为机会比
I'll give you a couple tidbits on the leaders to do that. You need leaders who can drive and incentivize
回老路上这样，
and you
够克制魅力。
the incentive. If they need
我讲你去麦当劳边，
compensate them well. I've heard people say that. I've heard people say that. And I want to say this in a way that somehow I can like make it real because it's real for me now. It's the thing that I was pattern recognition. High quality. No, that was right.
这样啊，我来每天。
Actually, here's a different way to think about it. If you have a $100 million business, you might have 1 or 2 founders, who have 9 figure salary, you know, skill sets. But the people who are going to run the business, and next year, and so, in order to create $100 million business, you might have $2 million entrepreneurs and then 5 $50 entrepreneurs. And then underneath them, you have many 7-figure entrepreneurs. Right? And so it's almost like an aggregate. The aggregate business is the added up potential of all the skills of all the players in it. And that was just a bit like, if you don't think that your head of sales could go do sales and like, if your person in marketing could start a marketing agency, then they're probably not going to market, right? And so that's kind of the thinking process. It's like if none of the people that you have could go do it on their own, then you probably don't have good enough people. And that's the thing is, you have this fear like, oh, what if I bring something in who can do it on their own, they'll just steal my stuff. It's like, or if you don't bring them in, you literally do it for the rest of your life. You have to create the vision and the opportunities that are big enough. And this is where this is your job. Still makes more sense. For a person to work here because they can have uncapped earnings. So there's a difference between like somebody needs to own the whole business, which the biggest business in the world, no one owns the whole business. Well, I mean, the biggest, I think publicly traded, but I'm sure there's some secret Arabian oil factory that I don't know about, that one guy owns. But like the vast majority of businesses, many people own them, right? But what's more key is that someone has unlimited earning capacity, and I think that's the key. That's how you can get A players. If they are true A's, they'll fucking light up. The thing is, it makes sense because the return on effort is higher. Because
什么是 spider web？
that person's like
蜘蛛网。
对
floater
它散掉了，然后我 AI 说你要拿去医院检查。
什么是散掉的意思？
就是
没了。
本来不是没了，本来是固定的，现在变散开了，变 break up， 然后再拿去医院检查，他说没事。他说没有新的链，不怕跑到医院去。
Take this with a gigantic grain of salt, but I do think that this will work out, and I'll tell you why. She's a psychopath, and I think I had normal people, and I'm not normal, and so I needed a psychopath, and I realized that the number one thing that I mean, you said this in the interviews, but I still wasn't. I had never actually experienced it. I knew it in theory, but I hadn't experienced it, which is speed over everything. I needed someone who will always respond to me within 60 seconds, no matter when I message. And I will go for hours and hours and hours with nothing, and then the moment I message you, I need full resources, full attention, because in that moment, you are my constraint. And I needed someone who had more competence, general horsepower. So I will say this for all you guys who are founders who you know have schedules and whatnot. One, I think you should be the one who manages your time. In terms of who's doing the blocking and tackling, that's separate. I think you can outsource that. But who makes decisions on your time? If your time is your most valuable resource, why would you want anyone but the person who's the best allocator of resources, aka you, the person who's choosing how the time gets spent? So thing number 1. 2, I think speed above everything. Now, also above everything is general intelligence, and I think this is something that I did not appreciate. I did not screen for as much, and it was a mistake. And I found this by accident. My career is very intelligent.
你们没有，我真没有，我真没出去玩。
没有。My ability to actually get through tasks that I do that come up that require horsepower, I can actually get them and be like, just do a first draft, and I can get 80% of that done, and then I can tweak.
你饭吃了没有？还没吃呢。
So the next piece that I think is really helpful is whether you're a maker or manager, plan your time accordingly and live and die by that. I've had some of the most productive weeks of my life. I finally, for the first time in so long, I actually feel like I'm ahead.
没有出去，谁出去？
She's keeping track of all my projects and knowing what loops. Like, hey, when are you going to post loop on this? When are you going to this followed up? And so I'm sharing this with you. Pay more than you expect. Look for somebody who's more intelligent and say speed is not enough, and have them want to make a manager video because I think that would be a huge amount of context to how you live your life. And so for me, that was a huge learning issue. Next one is, if there's ever a problem in an organization or department or a line of revenue, look at the leader. And here's the rule. The leader is always the problem. Not sometimes. The leader is always the problem. So if a function is mediocre, it's because the leader is mediocre, period. Full stop, no questions. So it's either the leader and the team or just the leader, but it's never just the team. So if the leader is mediocre and then they brought in mediocre people, it's the leader and the team. If the leader is mediocre and you've got a great team, the leader will turn the great team into a mediocre. And so I had a conversation with a business owner the other day, and he had 4 locations. 2 of them were doing well, 2 of them were doing poorly. I asked a zillion questions to finally get the fun fact, which is that he had somebody in the company who was running them, who was a longtime friend, and also, we'll just say, an addict. I'll just say that. And every day was coming up to work, messed up, inebriated, whatever you want to say. And he was asking for tactical business advice when I was like, there is no tactical business advice. There is nothing that will matter because no one will listen to somebody who they're like, well, why don't you show up to work sober? Why don't we start there, right? No one will respect. Imagine that guy coming in and being like, hey guys, let's pick up the pace. What? Like, what are we talking about? And so it's like all these questions like pricing and sales, like, dude, none of this matters until we fix the leader problem, right? But the thing is that's obviously an extreme example, but it happens at every level. If your media team's not working well, the leader. If your sales team isn't good, the leader. The question is, after you pull the leader out, is the team also screwed? Got a 50-50 shot there. They had a low bar, they brought in more people, that sucks. Now, if you have, now it's like, well, what happens if you have a bad team and a good leader in place? Have you ever seen a good coach turn around a bad team? Pretty sure there's a ton of movies about it. Yes, you have a great leader, they can turn a mediocre team into a great team. So I think I spent too much time early on in my career trying to pinpoint problems. Straight up, there's a problem, a function, leader's the issue. Let's solve it. It's so much faster. So there's a razor point. Lesson 24. In the world of AI, your brand is your moat. All right, now this is not going to be news to some of you, and for some of you, this hopefully it's news to none of you. But if it is news, welcome to 2026. So if that's the case, because services and products can become increasingly commoditized, and listing goals and content, things like that are easy to reproduce, how can you build a brand, right? So branding, the act of it, is who and what you associate with. That is what will matter. And so in a world of AI, you have to be thinking about this. And so if you're a local business, for example, your brand will be mostly word of mouth and the reviews about you online. That's what the reality is. But just about every other business, it's that plus all of the
坐
content they're
公
making.
共汽车才2半到那医院去。
most
2
people
半
versus
啊。
that, which is, as
他
always,
就在那
one
个
secret,
Manchester 那个下站就
people do
走
not
进
want to
去。
do the work for whatever it is that you're showing. Whether you're showing about fixed toilets, they'll just call you to do their plumbing. If you're talking about
你以
fixed
前最
relationships,
贵多少
they'll call you
？20磅
to
是吧
fix their relationship. You talk about fix their business, they'll call you help them fix their business, right? People do not want to do the work, or they don't want to do it alone. Key. Myself included. I will always pay to go faster and decrease risk so that I don't have to do backtracks. Like, I get the DIY. I will consume something, be like, this person clearly knows what they're talking about. I will pay to go faster. And I will pay to have you take this generic thing, make sure it's applied to my business so that it's right, because I don't want to pay the tax of ignorance. And so, if you know this to be true, then the question is, if I want to build a brand in 2026, I want to think about what are the curated associations that I want to make that will reinforce the position that I want to have in my prospects' minds. What things do they like that I want them to think of me when they think of that? And so that's what we want to do. So what do you think we're going to do? I'm going to do a lot more business fixing next year. And I have to build a lot more infrastructure in order to do that, but it's a demonstration of skill. Right? What's something that very few people can do in your market that you can demonstrate better than anyone else? Do that. You do everything you possibly can. Do it until your eyes bleed, because the market won't even know you exist by the time you're done. So on the talk track of brand has to be constantly reinforced. So you need to keep pushing the envelope to stay relevant. Something is only a big deal if you make it one. No one knew about the launch. No one. I have almost 20 million or 17, I don't know what it is, between 16 and 20, I haven't checked them all. 16, 20 million followers or subscribers across all different channels or whatever. The vast majority of people did not know about the launch. They didn't even know about it. And I tried really, really hard. And in order to stay relevant, you still have to keep going bigger and bigger. Like, why would I do the launch? It's like, well, I got, like, it's like, just because, like, Chris Bumstead, when he won the first Olympia, it doesn't mean he's done. It's like, we gotta win the Olympia again. You gotta maintain the title. It's like, that's why he's defending the title, right? So you have to continue to, and I think this is what's lost when some people's like, let's say, man, the climb is so tough. It's like, no, man, holding the top's way harder than climbing. Right? There's always levels to the game. And so it's like, once you get your title, whatever your title is for you, it's like you have to keep taking on new title bouts to keep defending the belt. And maybe the stages keep getting bigger, right? In business, that like the stages can only keep getting bigger. I'll tell you a failure that I had around the launch. I think on the PR front, I had planned for a big PR kind of blast off on the back end of that, and basically that fell flat. Not basically the PR firm that I had, I didn't have really any attention to put towards it. It was a miss. It was a miss. Like, how many articles did you see about some internet person doubling the world record? Not that many, and that would totally have been fixable if I just had queued up a bunch of PR. I just didn't. So that was a miss. That was a miss for me. Next one, the greatest risk to the business is that you don't feel like doing it. This is super real. So the reason that people, like, most businesses don't actually run out of money. The founder runs out of money, and so like you have to have the frame shift to, it has to be worth suffering for. And I do think that making money is a component of it. Like, I had somebody the other day who was like, hey, I'm thinking about switching the business, and that's how most businesses die. Like, entrepreneurs switches and says, no, worth it anymore. I said, if this thing made 10 times the money, would you keep doing it? And they're like, hell yeah. Would you look at this other business? They're like, no, let's just fix the business, right? So making more money can help, but I will say, kind of like the electroshock therapy, if it made 10 times the money, it will help in the short term, but not forever, because plateaus are often the ones that stay in it the longest. So what do I mean by that? Like, it's like the shrinking and the growing are the ones that are, I think, the most painful. The plateaus, people can just stay in them for years, because it's just like not painful enough to quit, but still very painful. So the ones that grow fast are in lots of pain, and eventually they don't need the money anymore at all. And so those are very, like, if you grow a lot and you get a lot of money really quickly, you then stop wanting to be in all the pain that this tremendous growth provides you, because you're like, I don't need And so on the flip side, the ones who are shrinking, who are very volatile, deal with the most pain, obviously. So you have the same volatility and pain of the growth guy, except you also aren't making money. So that is the most pain that you will be in business. And so what we're solving for as entrepreneurs is something worth doing, right? Having something, and I think that the most powerful thing that has helped me is having something outside of yourself that the business acts as a vehicle that you drive towards. And so for some people that's like some societal impact that you want to make, that's some problem that you want to solve. For me, it's the person that I want to become. But like that's very easy to say, and I've heard many people say it. Their actions don't align with
这个自己
that.
吃了
So
拿
whatever
着
that thing
拿
is for
着
you,
端
it
着
might not be that you want to become this person. But whatever that thing is for you, it's like it has to be real because you have to fix the business to allow you to achieve that thing. Because once you make all the money that you want to make, you have to have another reason to do it. And so that is why entrepreneurs not wanting to do it is the greatest risk to the business. And I think that like I have to always keep that front of mind. Like the thing that like I have to be willing at this point for acquisition.com to do some things that I just want to do, even if it's not in the business's best interest, because it's in my best interest. And if it's in my best interest, I will keep doing the business.
There are about 200 million people in
这
the
边
world.
肉都被咬没了，有没有人吃这边？我煮那么多，你没咬？
没吃没吃。
你没有？
哦，我有咬。
哦，那
我刚才
老公也没咬。
他不知道。
就等我回来煮，他也不煮。
他
然后
为什么要煮
叫我去？吃麦当劳，我那么多东西提回来，麦当劳怎么卖得了？我吃完了要去买菜，菜都没了，要去买他吃的菜。
But I do think a lot of people get very self-important about their legacy, and the reality is most people are not remembered for more than their children's, maybe their direct descendants generation, and even then, you just hope that they remember you fondly.
Yeah. And speaking of the next generation, because I'm in climate, like people who have kids, sometimes that's when they switch to climate. You also talk about this in your book. You said that capitalism has to be improved if we don't want to be fried. Like that. But the climate technology field nowadays has been going through like a winter because of the reason it doesn't really necessarily fit into the VC model, or you cannot scale that fast. I've been thinking about this a lot. I don't have an answer. I don't know how
There
you
are
look at
about
this field
200 million people in the world
climate.
who, if Tim Cook stood up and announced that the next iPhone was going to be a turd on a stick, they'd still rush it.
But like I don't control it. I don't have any influence over what happens with the climate. And there's so many other smart people that I know that are very focused on it. And I kind of have a bit of a techno-optimist approach of like I believe that maybe AI will bring in some kind of new technology that enables us to conquer climate change. But I don't know what's going to happen. And I think ultimately these problems are not solved by scarcity, right? We can't all say let's not have air conditioning and not drive cars, which a lot of environmentalists will say. I think ultimately we have the tools to solve the climate crisis. A lot of the problem, and in that instance, I'd actually say the failure of not capitalism but regulation. I think there's way too much regulation. It's very difficult to build, for example, like a solar farm.
AI 有的时候也不准。
对。
拿医院去。
对，有的时候错。
他说快点拿医院去。
啊。然后你去医院，然后他说没事。
他医生也检查，他说没事。
但是有的时候医生也是错啊，所以 AI 也会错，人不是也会错。
I think in this way, because I've been focusing on climate for like a few years, and then I feel like there's a camp of environmentalists, and then there's people who are doing real things with the climate technology, and I love to talk to those people. I have a second podcast called Bite Size Climate Tech, and I talk to scientists and engineers. Whenever I talk to them, I just feel very hopeful about the future, because nobody controls the future, but at least there's people who are trying to do that. It's a nice time to come to a lightning round. So I have the 3-2-1 lightning round. The first one is 3 quick picks. So you're gonna pick one book that changed your perspective on success, one podcast or newsletter you always open immediately, and the final one is one popular Charlie Munger quote or idea you actually try.
I'll start with the Charlie Munger one. Charlie Munger called cryptocurrencies rat poison squared, and I think the reason that he called them that was because he put it really well. He said, it's like everybody's trading turds, and everyone's like, I don't want to be left out, right? And there's an element of that, right? I think there's the NFT craze and some of these things where truly the things that people are trading don't have any value, and there's some people that are just scammers trying to take everyone's money. But I do think that crypto does actually, if it can get rolled out and deregulated, I think it could be really exciting. I mean, the idea that for me to move $1 to you costs a cent, a lot of the time seems crazy. I just think that, and that's a pure drag on productivity in the economy. And so the idea that you could go and say like, hey, I want to sell my house to you, and we don't need the government to do anything. It's on the blockchain, and the deed gets moved to you, and all the documents are smart contracts and stuff. That's very exciting to me. So I think Charlie was probably wrong. He's right about people trading turds. Those probably were turds a couple years ago. But I think he kind of maybe completely dismissed cryptocurrencies. What was the other one?
Yeah, the one is one book that changed your perspective on success.
So I'll take that in a bit of a different direction. So I read a book called Rabbit is Rich by John Updike, and it's fiction. I always heard that John Updike was an amazing reader or amazing writer, and so I picked up this book series, and this is the second, I think it's the second book, and it's set in the 1970s, in 1977, and in it, the main character is about my age, and it talks about middle age in a way where I realize that I'm not unique. That, you know, everyone that he's talking to says, you know, the Japanese are taking over, inflation is destroying the dollar, kids these days have no work ethic, oh my god, the kids are all complaining we can't afford houses, oh my god, the Russians are going to invade. And you realize, I remember reading that book and just realizing, like, oh my god, like, this is me and all my friends. We're all kind of 40 to 50, and we have all these same thoughts, and, all these same opinions, and really it's like history doesn't repeat but it rhymes. And so for me that was a bit of a moment of, maybe that is not how I want to be. I don't want to be the
那558手机，
你打你手机电话。
我手机电话都被他拿了。我在这，我吓了一跳。吓了一跳。
手机没就再买一个，那你有那
么多。online banking 啊。
那是你的问题啊。那你不要把你手机带出去。
我要去超市买菜，他什么都不买，我打给他，他叫他买橘子，他在家里干嘛？
睡觉，在家里睡觉。
And so I actually always savor what they have to say because to me it feels very relevant. Like they feel like they're at the metal, as they say. They're like right on the edge. Whereas I feel like a lot of the time you hear stuff and it's like kind of, it would be exciting to an AI researcher like, you know, 6 months ago.
Yeah, right? Gotcha. Well, such a good recommendation. The second one is a 2 tiny investments under $100.
So I really like it might be over 100, but it's around there. The Logitech Casa. So Logitech Casa is, if you travel or you're in a hotel, you want to work, or at a cafe, it's basically this little, it looks like a little notebook, and it opens up, and it's a laptop stand, a keyboard, and a mouse, and it's all fit perfectly into this really beautiful design. And so when I travel, I always bring my Logitech Casa. I love to work out of cafes, and I just find having a full keyboard and mouse and being able to sit up straight is amazing. So that's been a really awesome addition.
我500手機就拿起，我500手機就拿起。那都幾咩嘛？幾咩嘛？你做乜佢攞咩？伊講 Tesco 但係少邊啊4磅。
One piece of common entrepreneurial advice you genuinely believe in and one you think is complete.
你冇佢咩？
I think if you want to, one thing is just like doing is so much more valuable than reading about it, right? Like actually having the hands-on experience. It's like if you want to be a great runner or athlete, imagine being told you have to read a textbook to learn how to run. Like that's not how it works. You need to run. The other is, you know, all this hustle culture stuff about how if you want to be successful, you have to sacrifice. Mr. Burns from the Simpsons quote, he says, friends, family, hobbies, these are the 3 demons you must slay if you want to be successful at business. And I think there's a lot of that kind of messaging out there.
30岁了，你还会现在才5、6岁，我不管你。
20 years, and I've still been able to achieve all sorts of stuff. Am I always on my phone or thinking about work? Yes, but I'm not. I still have time for friends and having a life and being a good dad.
人家有的小孩子会乖的去做那个 care assistant， 一年做也会赚10几20万。
Like first year, I think because I was doing so many roles, I was probably working like 8 or 9. But honestly, like I was like partying and drinking and doing all sorts of stuff in my.
自己端起来端了，这主人拿端着，我去买菜。
Until 7 or 8, and then go to and then go straight to working again. And I know that's really tricky, but honestly, that's what I was doing in my 20s.
为什么一直养？
And somehow I managed to create a pretty big business, and a lot of that was because of delegation. Learning how to delegate and let go and not be holding on to the machine.
Part of the partying was it also building business relationships?
No, a little bit. Like when I go on a business trip and get drunk with people,